everyone. Welcome to tonight's Planning Commission meeting. We are a deciding body that has been appointed by your town council to make recommendations and decisions on land use matters within the town of Los Gatos. We welcome your attendance and highly encourage your participation. If you would like to speak on any of the items that are under discussion tonight, please submit a speaker's card. It looks like this. It's located on the back of your chamber benches, and just indicate which agenda item you'll be speaking on. Also, if you need any copies of the materials that we have before us, all of those should be located in the lobby. And with that, I would like to ask Ms. Bailey for roll call.
Commissioner Bourgeois?
Here.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Here.
Commissioner Talasfor? Commissioner Erickson?
Here.
Vice Chair Jensen?
Here.
Chair Syok?
Here.
And Ogle and Talasfor so far have an excuse or an absence.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner O'Donnell, will you lead us in tonight's pledge?
That's it so far.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is approval of minutes from our previous two meetings. They were on May 31st and June 8th. Are there any questions or comments with regards to the minutes? Commissioner Bourgeois.
I would like a clarification made on the minutes of May 31st. It notes that I was absent, and in reality, I was actually recused. There was only one item on the agenda, and I was recused from that. So,
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Any other comments? Commissioner O'Donnell.
I may have misread it. Was it clear in the minutes as to why I was confused as to how many people could vote, and what, for example, why somebody couldn't vote? Was that on the record somehow?
I think Commissioner O'Donnell is referring to the fact that I didn't vote on what I'm going to call the Netflix project, and Ms. Propp is aware of the circumstances and why I was here at that meeting.
Well, the reason I ask is the code section the council relies on has a subsequent code section that says when you do that, you must state a reason.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Donnell. On the night of the council requires that for their code of conduct. We didn't, and that's certainly something that we didn't have, that those code of conduct doesn't apply necessarily to Planning Commission, but it certainly does suggest that we should have asked the commissioner for a reason for abstention at that time, and we failed to do that.
The only reason I ask,
I can state it now.
let me just finish my question with her. The only reason I ask is I have no doubt as to the validity of why you didn't vote. However, in determining whether a quorum is present, if a commissioner recuses himself or herself, I believe she is not present for determination of a quorum. And since that matter was not on the record, I believe we determined a quorum, and perhaps there wasn't one.
So just for clarification, we pulled the Town of Los Gatos Planning Commission policies and procedures that were most recently updated by a minor amendment last December. And a quorum is 4 members. And it clearly says in 9.3, an abstention does not diminish the quorum in order for the commission to conduct business. So your rules currently do provide that even if a member abstains, that is counted for the quorum, and we had 4 members present that evening.
Well, I have no intention to argue the matter. However, I believe that a abstention for reasons of conflict requires the asserting party to leave the room during the discussions and on the vote, and therefore is not present. So we'll leave that to further conversation, but it does strike me that the record was, 1, not complete, and 2, I don't know that the commissioners were aware of the issue at that time.
Ms. Propp, do you want me to answer the question in full, given what the circumstances were and the discussions that we had regarding that item?
All I would, that is
completely at your discretion. What I would indicate to you is that the commission nor staff was aware of any conflicts of interest that would have risen to the level of recusal or someone not participating that night. If that's so, if that's what you're asking for, that's up to Commissioner Jensen this evening if she'd like to clarify that record.
One last thing, the determination as to whether you have a conflict or an appearance of a conflict, I believe, is a personal decision, and therefore, if you determine that you have a conflict, we don't argue about that, and you recuse yourself. And I'm assuming that's what. Well, I don't know, and I'll find out now from the commissioner.
I informed Ms. Prop that my husband is a partner in a law firm which has a major client, which is Netflix. Because Netflix was not formally the applicant, Ms. Prop advised me that I technically did not have a conflict that I needed to recuse myself for. I, however, felt that there was an appearance of a conflict and wished to recuse myself. If I had done so, I would have sent over 100 people home on May 31st because Commissioner Bourgeois was recused, Commissioner O'Donnell was out of the country, and Commissioner Ogle was absent. If I had left, there would have been no meeting. So if someone wants to challenge whether that was properly a quorum, the reason I stayed and abstained is because I felt that I had an appearance of conflict. However, if I had left, there would be no quorum and there would be no meeting.
Okay. Any other questions or comments with either to the May 31st or June 8th agenda? Commissioner Bourgeois?
Can I go ahead and make a motion?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and make a motion to approve the minutes of May 31st with the noted changes I requested on page 1 and I believe during the motion on page 15, and as well as approval of the minutes of June 8th as is.
Okay. And do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Commissioner Erickson seconds. And Commissioner Jensen.
I was absent on June 8th, but I'm going to vote on the minutes because I reviewed them.
Okay. And just want to clarify that staff caught those clarifications?
That is correct.
Okay. So all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, nay? The motion passes. Okay, no problem. Okay, welcome, Commissioner Ogle. We are just at written communications. So written communications, commissioners, we do have several desk items for items number 3, number 4, and number 5. 4 and 5 are pretty lengthy, so if you do need some time before we begin these items, just catch my attention and we can do so, okay? Requested continuances, we have none. And we are at subcommittee reports. Now, I don't believe CDAC or General Plan has met, but Commissioner Erickson, did Historic Preservation meet since? Do you mind giving us an update?
The Historic Preservation Committee met this afternoon. And a report from the Director of Public and Parks and Public Works about the planning going on about resurfacing streets in the Almond Grove District, the Broadway District, and other parts of that area of town adjacent that are in the planning stages. We also recommended approval of a second-story addition on a home in the Broadway District at 321 Main Street to the Director of Community Development with some minor changes to what was proposed by the applicant. Then we approved a minor change to a residence at 68 Broadway to replace a door with a window, and recommended approval of a proposal to add a garage to the back part of a property at 135 Tate, and then had a very interesting discussion with a representative of the architectural firm who is doing the planning for the new owners of the theater downtown, and it was not an action item but an informational discussion to get some feedback about plans which they're developing that will eventually become a formal application to the town to do some some renovation of the theater in terms of the plans that the new owner would have for its use.
Thank you, Commissioner Erickson. Any questions? No? Commissioner O'Donnell?
In that hearing today, was there any discussion of modifying the use or changing the use?
As I understand, and this would not be, as you would know, not the province of the Historic Preservation Committee, my understanding, and this was the architectural firm, so not the owners or who would be the eventual applicant for a potential change in use, the preliminary drawings that they're exploring are based on that it would be both movie theater and live, the potential for live performances. Also with some discussion about having a lounge seating in the upper area, so providing seating in the second level, and an area on the second level that would be a lounge kind of an area that might also have live entertainment to the extent that that would be consistent with the live entertainment policy of the town, and might even propose at some point, as I understand from an architectural firm, the potential alcohol beverage service. But I don't want to preempt what their application would be, just reporting what the architectural firm reported this afternoon.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. And so now we are at verbal communications. This is the time during our meeting where anyone may speak on any item that is not currently on our agenda. I don't have any speaker cards, but I just wanted to see if there's anyone that would like to speak before we move on. Okay. So we are at consent calendar. Commissioners, we currently have 2 on our agenda, and I have two cards to remove agenda item 1 from consent. So, do I have any other, would you like to remove agenda item 2? I'm asking commissioners first. Anyone in the audience would like to remove 2? So seeing none, I'd like to see a motion for item number 2 on consent. Commissioner Jensen.
I move approval of item number 2 on our consent calendar, which is conditional use permit U-10-022 with the conditions and specifications as indicated in the staff report.
Can I have a second? Commissioner Erickson?
I'll second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion passes unanimously, 6-0. And so now we are at our public hearings, and the item that has been pulled from consent, that was agenda item number 1. That is located at 17230 Buena Vista Avenue, subdivision application M-11-001, architecture and site applications S-11-004 and 013. And Ms. Bailey, will Ms. Savage be giving tonight's report?
Yes, she will.
Great.
Good evening, Chair, Commissioners. The property is located on the south side of Buena Vista Avenue, approximately 200 feet east of Winchester Boulevard, and is surrounded by single-family residential uses. The applicant is requesting to subdivide a 21,592 square foot parcel into 2 lots and demolish the existing single-family residence and accessory structures. A 1-story residence is proposed on Lot 1, and a 2-story residence is proposed on Lot 2. The proposed lot sizes exceed the minimum requirements for the zoning designation and are compatible with the immediate neighborhood. The proposed residences are compatible with the neighborhood in terms of size and architecture. The Development Review Committee normally has purview over these applications, but the applications were forwarded to the Planning Commission at the direction of the Town Council through the rezoning application process. This concludes staff presentation, and staff is available for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Savage. Commissioners, any questions of Ms. Savage? Okay, so let's go ahead and begin our public testimony. And I believe the applicant is Gregory Howell? No. Okay. Okay, if you wouldn't mind coming up and speaking. And you have 5 minutes, and afterwards, if I could just ask you to fill out one of these. But you have 5 minutes to speak.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Commissioners. I'm Mark DiMattei. I'm a partner in this project, and I've been working with Greg Howell to do this lot split and to assist in the designing of 2 single-family custom homes. And as Jennifer said, we've been through a process here, and so I'm here to answer any questions. We've taken down minimal trees. There's a full tree report. We have drawings. I have photos. Whatever questions anybody has, I'm happy to answer them and work accordingly with you to resolve any potential issues. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioners, any questions at this point? Okay. So let me call our first speaker, Melissa Gramstad. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Okay, thanks. If you could just state your name and address before you speak. And you have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Melissa Gramstad, and I live at 112 Privada Luisita. Basically, the site on Buena Vista is on the corner of Buena Vista and Privada Luisita. Privada Luisita has 4 houses on the street. There's no parking on one side of the street and limited parking on Privada Luisita because you can't park in front of mailboxes and people don't get their mail and such. So there's basically parking for about 6 cars, and between 4 houses, it's pretty much parked on all the time. So my biggest issue with the subdivision of this property is how they're going to deal with parking. Right now, there's really not that much parking on Buena Vista, and if 2 cars do park on Buena Vista, 1 on each side of the road, you can't get emergency vehicle, let alone our other cars, through. The road's very narrow, and parking has been an issue. They recently, within the last 6 or 7 years, put 2 houses on the corner of Winchester and Buena Vista, and didn't allow for extra parking for those houses. So unless people want to park in their garage, which most people don't, and park on their driveway, there's really not parking for those cars. There's several houses on Buena Vista that do have parking incorporated into their landscape, and that's what I'm asking to be done here, is that the house that they want to demolish, typically there were 6+ cars parked on that property, not in the street on Buena Vista or Privada Luisita, but solely on that property that they want to subdivide. And I think that these new houses need to have enough off-street parking for up to 6 cars in addition to their garage spaces incorporated into their landscape. And as I said, there's several houses on Buena Vista that already have that feature, but none of them that are between Privada Luisita and Winchester. Those houses don't really have any parking except in their driveways. We also are concerned about parking during construction, which I realize construction will be limited to a certain period, so my main concern is parking after the houses are complete and how that will affect my property values and such if people coming to my house can't park anywhere or can't even get to my house. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Hold up. Do we have any questions, Commissioner? Yes.
Thank you for coming here tonight. I appreciate your concerns. I'm just, where do, when you have visitors and your neighbors have visitors that live on Privada, where do they park now? On the street or?
So people who come to my house park on Privada Luisita, and if I have more than 5 cars, they pretty much illegally park on Privada Luisita because one side of the street is no parking. There's a fence. There's a private road between
the development and
Privada Luisita. So along that fence is a no parking signs on that entire side.
And you've seen similar trends when your neighbors have people over, their visitors park in the same spots?
Most of them park on Privada Luisita. My neighbors don't have huge numbers of visitors, but on Mother's Day, Father's Day, the road's full.
Okay, thank you.
And I have teenagers, so I have 4 cars in my family, so I have 2 in the driveway and 2 in the street because I didn't incorporate parking into my spot.
Okay, thank you.
But I have an older house, so it was built a long time ago.
Commissioners, any other questions?
Anyone else?
Okay, thank you. And the next speaker is Kate Schulke.
Thank you. My name is Kate Schulke. I live at 17216 Buena Vista. There are actually 2 parcels there that are mentioned in the report. We live off of the private driveway that Melissa was just speaking about, and one of our concerns is, in addition to the parking, the safety of we have 2 young children who ride their bikes, coming out of there, going on to Buena Vista, walk to school, have friends over, and I have concerns about additional traffic and parking of vehicles, construction vehicles during the project in particular. We've had major issues in the past coming up from Winchester on Buena Vista Avenue. There's very, very limited parking as it is, and with additional vehicles, people kind of swing out to the opposite side of the road, and in that process could present a safety hazard for our children who are on bikes and other children in the neighborhood. In addition to that, we are right up against the rear of the project. The current shape of that property is there's a lot of overgrown vegetation. The fences are in disrepair. So we have concerns about whether those things are going to be taken care of before the demolition and the construction project ensues, to make sure that it minimizes the amount of damage to our fence as well as debris and other things coming into our property. So those are our primary concerns.
Thank you. Commissioners, Commissioner O'Donnell.
I'm sorry, I must have missed it. Could you tell me again exactly where you live in relation to this project?
If you look at the project, we have the 2 parcels that are labeled 17216 Buena Vista Avenue. So our ingress and egress is on the private driveway that Melissa referred to. So we have the property that abuts the rear of this project.
Okay, thank you.
Two parcels. And as Melissa said, our property incorporates parking on the lot, and I agree that I think you need to allow for additional parking on the lot, just given the limited parking in the neighborhood.
Okay. Commissioners, any other questions? Okay, thank you. And Mr. DiMattei, if you could come back up, you have 3 minutes. If you could just respond to the issues you heard.
First of all, thank you very much for your concerns. I'm definitely sensitive to each individual issue that you've brought up, and I feel that mitigating each one of these is very possible to do. And with regard to parking, if you look at the drawings, our setbacks on this project is very large, so there's very large front yards, very large driveways, wide driveways. So I think there is plenty of on-site parking. The current project that's there now that's being demolished is a rental type of a property, so I think that because you live there, but I think that there was a lot of abandoned-looking type trailer vehicles and things like that stored on that site. So that, of course, will be much better with these custom homes that I'm putting on there. But as far as the driveway and the parking and on-site, I think we're very well covered with on-site parking. If staff wants us to figure out a way to put some grasscrete or something in for an extra parking space, I'll work that out with the neighbors separately and staff separately, or however you guys like doing that. As far as the construction engineering plan per the staff report and the conditions of approval, we will have to come up with an engineered staff project site plan that allows construction parking where the people are going to park. I met with the neighbors, Greg and I met with the neighbors, the ones that showed up for our little neighborhood meeting probably 3 months ago or so. And we discussed, they brought the concerns out about the past projects, how construction parking was an issue. So we're going to make sure that we have the construction workers parking on site. My Los Gatos office is on University Avenue, so we can do some carpooling to get our workers there. So I will be very sensitive to that. And as you know, I've given you my cell phone number, and if you have any issues during the project, you can give me a call and I'll make sure it gets taken care of. But I will give it my utmost attention in dealing with the sensitivity. As for the vegetation and fencing, we'll take that into consideration, and we are replacing fencing and landscaping. It's on the landscape drawings. But again, with that, I'm willing to discuss whatever sensitive issues there are and work around them so that we could make sure you're happy during the project. So I believe I've covered it. If there's anything else, I'm happy to answer it. But as I said, I'm very available. You can reach out to me, and I'll reach out to you, and we'll make sure we have a successful project together.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any questions of Mr. DiMattei? Commissioner O'Donnell?
One of the speakers was talking about possibly having as much as 6 parking spots on site, and I believe she said in addition to the garage. Could you comment on what kind of parking you could have on each site, not including the garage?
Well, there's 2 houses, so that would be 3 cars per house, in addition to the 2-car garages. So the driveways alone are large enough to accommodate that, but it depends on how they're parked, and if there were to be some sort of an event going on at one of these homes, I suppose the homeowner could be a responsible person and make sure people park properly. I think that's all of our jobs as friendly neighbors, to work with your surroundings. So the driveways are, as you can see from the drawings, are plenty large to accommodate two very comfortably, 3 possibly, but like I said, in landscaping, we can always do some little grass crate type side parking area. These are very large setbacks on these homes, so that's what we could do.
Commissioner Bourgeois.
Thank you for your responses. I did notice on the plans where you're relocating the fence inside the property. Is there any reason why that can't be done? Is it like a first order of business?
If that's what we need to do to make everybody happy, that's what we'll do.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so if there's any questions of staff, now's the time to do so. Commissioner O'Donnell?
I just have one question. This suggestion that if need be, they could put another parking spot in with a grasscrete, he's apparently offering that the driveway would contain as much as 3, and then there's a 2-car garage. Do you have any opinion on whether, how convenient it would be to put another parking space in with the grasscrete as he says, or do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, first I want to confirm that in terms of the minimum size for an uncovered parking space, the Lot 1 has the room for approximately 4 cars in their driveway, and Lot 2 has room for approximately 3, just based on the existing proposal. And then in terms of adding additional parking, Lot 2, it's a little more difficult because of the existing redwood trees on the site, but certainly on Lot 1 there is room to do so if that was needed, but Lot 1 has the 4 versus the 3 in the driveway.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, any comments or anything that will lead us towards a motion? Commissioner O'Donnell.
I just had one more comment. I assume that we can impose, and I'm sure the applicant is willing, a reasonable construction operation agreement to address some of the issues raised here and kinds of things we fairly typically use. That's consistent with your proposal, isn't it?
That is correct, you can, and just to note, there is a construction management plan condition included in the conditions of approval.
Thank you.
And in that construction management plan, remind me again, does it cover parking, and it covers everything from hours of operation to parking of workers?
Hours of operation are covered under a different condition, but it does include the location for employee parking.
Okay. Okay. And because of the issue of the fence, is it possible to go ahead and stipulate that in that construction plan, just having that as first priority? Or would that be better as a separate condition?
It might be more appropriate to add it as a separate planning condition.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Anyone inclined to make a motion? Okay, Commissioner O'Donnell.
I'll make the motion, and if I fail to hit something one of you wants in there, please let me know. My motion would be that we find the proposed project categorically exempt pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act as adopted by the town, which is more particularly specified in Exhibit 2 to our package, which in particular are sections 15.315 and 15.303 of the California Environmental Quality Act. And we're also making the findings required by the cited section in paragraph 2 of the town code for granting approval of the demolition of a single-family residence. Again, that's spelled out in Exhibit 2. that we make the considerations as required again by the town code for granting approval of an architecture and site approval. See also Exhibit 2, which specifies that. We would therefore, and also, we would approve the subdivision application numbered M11001 with the conditions contained in Exhibit 3, as well as the condition proposed a moment ago by Commissioner Sayak, and that we would approve the architecture and site applications S11004, S11013, with the conditions contained in Exhibit 4.
Okay. Can I have a second? Commissioner Bourgeois? And would you like to comment?
I'll second that. I just wanted to clarify that the only change we're making is the condition to have the fence go in first. Basically,
Yes.
nothing, you felt comfortable with the amount of parking that is already being provided. Because I feel comfortable with it, and I want to make sure I'm seconding the motion the way I think it's being
I
made.
do feel comfortable with it. I understand the concerns of the neighbors, but in light of the 4 on one side and 3 on the other, plus the 2-car garages, yes, I do.
Yes, I agree. I'll second that motion.
Great. And any comments to the motion? Okay, I'll call it. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, nay. So it passes 6-0. And Ms. Bailey, are there appeal rights on this matter?
Yes, this decision is appealable to the town council. The appeal must be filed within 10 days. There is a fee for filing an appeal, and the appeal forms are located upstairs in the town clerk's office.
Okay, we are now at agenda item number 3, which is located at 416 North Santa Cruz Avenue. It is conditional use permit U-11-003. And I believe, Ms. Savage, you are also presenting this staff report?
Yes, thank you. The project site is located in the Los Gatos Shopping Center on the east side of North Santa Cruz Avenue, approximately 200 feet north of Los Gatos Saratoga Road. The site is surrounded by commercial uses, except at the rear. There is a town parking lot located at the rear of the commercial space, and single-family residential uses are located beyond that. An outdoor patio was approved in 2008 with other exterior modifications at the shopping center. In 2009, the town council approved the subject retail wine establishment with food, beer, and wine service, now known as Inoteca La Storia. The applicant is requesting outdoor seating and extended hours of operation. The existing patio is located within the shopping center, approximately 130 feet away from the public right-of-way. The applicant proposes to use the existing outdoor patio for 12 outdoor seats and proposes to install or use the existing railing as separation from the common walkway. In addition to that, they are also proposing some planters for additional separation. A host or hostess would seat patrons using the outdoor seating area, and the applicants would also post signage indicating that alcoholic beverages are not permitted beyond that outdoor patio. The business is proposing to remain open past the alcoholic beverage service hours allowed by the alcoholic beverage policy, but would stop serving alcoholic beverage serving alcoholic beverages 1 hour prior to closure. This would bring the project in compliance with the hours limited by the alcoholic beverage policy. The deciding body does need to make specific findings for alcoholic beverage service after 10 p.m., which the applicant proposes on Fridays and Saturdays. The business remains in good standing and would continue to provide the community with an established, successful wine establishment. The project would allow the establishment to provide outdoor seating and meets the requirements for the alcoholic beverage policy and the standards for outdoor seating. This concludes staff presentation, and staff is available for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Savage. Commissioners, any questions? So, okay, seeing none, I'll go ahead and open. We have one speaker card, and I believe is the applicant present? Okay, are you Mr. Guerra? If you have 5 minutes to come speak.
Thank you. My name is Michael Guerra, and I'm one of the owners of Inoteca La Storia. Thank you for your time tonight, and I'm I don't know what to say other than that in addition to what we submitted, so I'm just here to answer any questions or concerns you may have regarding our application.
Okay, Commissioner O'Donnell.
I raised a question today with staff, which I understand they alerted you to, so hopefully you will be aware of the question I'm about to ask you. I've had the pleasure of going to your restaurant a couple of times, and I think you're doing a wonderful job, and it's a nice addition to Los Gatos. I had a problem, however, in the sense that, as I understand the existing conditional use permit, you have a maximum limit of 30 people on site and 16 chairs on site. I didn't walk around the two rooms and count them, but it seemed to me that your success was outstanding, but your counting wasn't. So I'm wondering if you can tell me, just so we get this straight, when you walk in the door, there's a separate room to the left, correct, which has, I don't know, 4 or 5 tables, which have interesting capacities. I was there with my wife, and there were 8 young ladies on one side, and anyway, there were quite a few people in that room. If you go in the other room where you have your wine displayed, there are perhaps 3 what I would call half tables, and one night I was there where there were 5 of us sitting at that half table. And then you have something which I will call a bar. It's not a bar as such, but it is a place where people can sit down facing where the food is prepared. And I don't know how many seats you've got there, but those are all chairs. So as I understand it, staff called to your attention a couple of months ago that you might be kind of over the number. That's what I'm advised. Can you tell me what the number of chairs I might find were I go there tonight?
To be honest with you, I'm not sure how many chairs we have exactly. The concept that we have is that side room is there for, special events, classes, tastings. What we've tried to do, and you're right, it's been a challenge for us, the popularity, because we're in a position of trying to manage the number of people that are coming in the door, and providing, a comfortable, safe, pleasant experience for the customers. So on the occasion, there has been people in there that are in, I don't know exact. We've never done an exact head count of people that are in there. What we're finding is that if that happens, it's typically after regular business hours. So my understanding is that after regular business hours, the surrounding businesses, it's more of a parking issue, is what's tied to the seating. So after regular business hours, the businesses surrounding us are closed. A lot of the parking spaces then are open for general use. And so on the occasion when that's happened, it has been after regular business hours when we assume that now there's more parking available. We have never, to this date, had any complaints from either customers, our fellow businesses in the center, or any of the residents that surround us as far as parking issues, noise levels, or anything like that. So,
when I went there, and it was twice last week, and I'm at least 30 years older than your average person there. I got a kick out of that. So I felt like somebody from another planet visiting, but I had a really good time. But it was, I don't go out to dinner real late, and I didn't stay real late. That room was open both times. You have wonderful business, so it was crowded, and particularly Friday night. It was very crowded.
Right, yeah.
This whole report that we get from staff is premised on the numbers that we put in your conditional use permit. So I'm not alleging you're causing any trouble at all, but I guess I just want to make sure that what we look at and what we approve has some relation to reality. You have accepted conditions which apparently are not being paid attention to. I have to assume that when staff suggests we impose these conditions, there's a reason for it. So if staff feels that there's no reason for a limit, for example, parking is directly connected to the number of people in there. Mm-hmm. If there are twice as many people in there as are permitted, there are not twice as many parking spots as we assumed. We're going to add, you're asking to add, is it 16 or 12 more seats. So I guess I'm confused because as a commissioner, when we impose conditions on people, we like to think they get followed.
Right.
And we like to think the staff pays attention as to whether they get followed, but I'm advised that we are understaffed and overworked. So we apparently don't do that. So we have to rely on you. So I guess I'm really asking you, are you prepared to accept the conditions that presently exist on your conditional use permit?
Absolutely. We're you know, as I said, it's a challenge for us. We're a new business, and we are continually trying to, you know, provide, you know, stay in compliance with the conditions that we were granted business, and be a viable business, and not, and again, provide a comfortable, pleasant experience for our customers. So it's something that we're continually, you know, struggling with. You know, I'm more than happy, being relatively new to this, to kind of reach out to the other establishments in town and ask them how they manage this, because
I don't suggest you do that. What I suggest you do is take a good hard look at this, and if you feel the conditions are unreasonable and unnecessary,
I hear you.
You come back and ask us to modify. I just like this all to be. You feel kind of foolish when you impose conditions and nobody pays any attention to them.
Right.
So
I'm happy to do that. You know, I'll make a commitment that we you know, going forward, will monitor this, and if it seems that we are in violation of that more times than not, then I'm happy to come back before the body. And
don't weigh it by more times than not. Try to comply with the conditions that you have.
Okay.
And if you find them to be unreasonable, which they could be,
right,
come on back and get it modified.
I will do
But
that.
otherwise, make that good attempt to comply with the rules under which you operate.
I will do
so
that.
I appreciate your attitude.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate that.
If I could just follow that line of thought. You're requesting 12, and it's specifically 12 for outdoor. And in the summer and on very nice days, that would be fine. But in the winter, are you planning to bring the 12 seats indoors so that you would have 28 total, regardless of the season?
I was under the impression we're asking for, you know, to get our maximum seating, and then have flexibility depending on season and necessity to adjust seats as we need. So there's going to be times, like you're saying, in the summertime we'll definitely, you know, max the capacity out there in the patio. But in the wintertime, when you know, the weather is not as nice, then we can then adjust that capacity to seat more people inside.
Okay. So if you put 12 seats outdoors, you still have the same capacity indoors, and that doesn't mean that you're going to have less number of people. If anything, you could have more patrons. And so what I'd like to hear is 28 total. Is that sufficient? And do you want more time to review this so that the conditional use permit that we put onto your property is actually realistic, so that we don't have to come back within a certain amount of time and say you're in violation, and we'll have issues.
Right.
I don't know if you want to give that some thought and get back to me afterwards.
Absolutely. Yeah, I might want to do that.
Okay.
Consult with.
Commissioner Ogle.
My question is sort of along the same line, because it seems that 16 indoor seats translates into 25 people, and I'm wondering if 12 outdoor seats is going to translate into a similar number of people, or if it's just 12 people, because there seems to be a ratio there in the permit that the CUP we agreed to. So I'm a little confused about how many people total.
Well, what's tricky on the inside is, as people file in the door, people are standing, people are, you know, ordering for food and drinks, and so we're trying to accommodate that. I think it's going to be much easier, actually, to manage outside, because there's going to be a hostess out there, and there's no bar out there. There's not going to be anybody that's going to be standing asking for food. It's going to be, the patio's full and you need to wait for a seat. So I think it's going to be much easier to manage.
Okay. Commissioner Erickson and then Commissioner O'Donnell.
Let me ask you a question to see if this would be reasonable from your perspective. If the conditional use permit, the revised one or the new one, limited the number of patrons to 28 total, and no more than 12 at any time outdoors. Does that work?
I would prefer that over, again, that would allow us some more flexibility. I would prefer that versus, having X number here and X number in another section. So I think that's more realistic.
You know infinitely better than I do, but my perception was that you do a really good business, and I cannot imagine you being limited to 28 people. Now, I'm concerned that we ought to say, well, what is a reasonable number of people within the restaurant?
Sure.
Because it isn't like we're going to approve something for the restaurants, something for outside, and then let you drag in the outside people as soon as it rains, which would suggest to me that we have set the number too low. So I'm kind of confused now. There's a present limitation of 30 people, and that includes staff. Right. You're going to put in 12 more tables, and I don't know what that means. Is it 12 more seats?
Seats.
Seats. So I don't know what you do to increase your wait staff, because you're going to have somebody out there waiting on it. So then if we try to come up with a total number, are we talking 50 people? What are we talking? So you tell us, but we need a number so that when, assuming we approve this, we can say, this is the number.
Okay.
Right now, I'm very confused.
Okay. Appreciate that, yeah.
Any other questions? Okay. So I believe I have one speaker card. I'll let that person speak, and then you'll have 3 minutes afterwards, and maybe you can give us some thoughts on where you'd like to go with this.
Okay, thank you.
And the speaker is Kamal Mehta.
Hi. I've been a resident of Los Gatos for almost 16 years. I moved here from Texas, and I refused to leave the town. And I'd like to say that Enoteca has been a really fine establishment since they opened last year. I've been there numerous times. Both Mike and his business partner, Joe, are really great individuals. Speaking of conditions, I really understand where you stand, because I work in an environment where I try to impose them every day and nobody listens. And for the most part, I agree, because they just don't have the time. They just want to get something done and move forward. So you can relate to that. I just want to say that Enoteca, giving them some outdoor patio space is a great idea. Los Gatos does have a few such establishments on North Santa Cruz and some on University that do have outdoor seating that serve alcohol. But those are in a very crowded environment, and parking is a major problem around those. You probably know which ones I'm talking about. It's in the Old Town Center, California Cafe, as well as Wine Bar. There's a couple of others that escape my mind right now. Since they moved in, and this is no way related to their being there, Coldwell Banker has moved into the big lot next door. I think by allowing them to flourish more, allowing them to get more business in, we see a better chance of that area being filled up by businesses. I know there's a lot of empty spots, but putting more business in there is good, because it's get more tax money. And it's good for the business. And I know a lot of people from out of town out of Los Gatos that do come to that establishment, or some even as far as San Francisco. And one of the questions that my friends have asked me is, when's the outdoor seating going to be in place so we can come hang out with you? The other thing to consider when you put in parking is a lot of residents walk to the establishment. I myself walk. It's about 10-minute walk, and especially in the summer, it's great. So just take that into consideration as well. And unlike the other establishments that have outdoor seating, this one is away from the main road and does not interfere with any people passing by the establishment. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions? Okay. I also have a speaker card from Jennifer, is it Charles? Shanks. I apologize for that.
Hi, sorry, throat's a little rusty right now. I moved to Los Gatos about 5 years ago, and Mel's point, I'm a big walker about town. I've got a dog, and in the spring and summer and fall months when it's nice outside, it's great to be able to, wander about. And there are only a few establishments that have outdoor seating, and I really do think that Enoteca would be a nice complement to, the other establishments in town that allow for that. But more importantly, I think that these guys have put together an establishment that as a young woman, they've always managed to keep it safe, comfortable. They take a lot of pride and responsibility in making sure that all of their patrons are taken care of and not and nothing rowdy or anything negative happens at their place, both indoors and hopefully outdoors. So I hope that while you all are considering this patio, knowing that having more outdoor seating would be a huge benefit to the town. B, again, as Carl mentioned, there are a lot of us who walk and would, not exactly impact parking at the area, but would like to be able to, go to an establishment that has extra seating and in the sun, and even bring our dogs along. And B, just take into account that, for the entire year that I've known them to be open, it's been a very, very well-run, well-conceived, and extremely comfortable and community-oriented venue. And I think that anything that they do with this new addition is going to be treated with the same thoughtfulness and consideration as, the way they've been running the interior of Enoteca La Storia. So,
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, thank you. And Samantha Owen. And just a reminder for those that are speaking today, if you could state your name and address right when you get to the podium.
Samantha Owen, 121 Massol Avenue. Apologies for the last-minute request to speak. This is our first time here. You can tell I'm not a native, so I wasn't sure if I was able to or not. But we've lived in Los Gatos, my husband and I. We moved here last July, and one of the first places we visited was actually Enoteca, and we were blown away by the hospitality of Mike and Joe. Like I said, very new to the area. We frequent it probably twice a week. We do walk ourselves from Massol Avenue as well, much to my husband's dismay. He's not a big walker, but I am. And I have to say, my husband broke his leg at the start of the year, and Mike and Joe were always hugely accommodating with at least finding him a chair if there wasn't space for me to sit down, as he was unable to stand for long times. So I just wanted to say, we've been blown away by their hospitality. We think it's fabulous. We've had parents, family, friends come and visit us, and we've taken every single one of them to Enoteca as our sort of favourite place in Los Gatos. Being from the UK and not being used to this fabulous weather, we also are desperate for somewhere we can actually sit out and enjoy the sunshine, because we're not used to it yet, and we don't like the air-conditioned buildings and having to sit indoors and drink wine. We love to be able to sit outside. So for us, it would be a real benefit to be able to enjoy this fabulous weather at a fabulous venue with these great guys. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions? Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Guerra, you have three minutes. You've heard positive things, but you're welcome to rebut those. But
I'm not that dumb. What I would like to propose in regards to the seating issue is that at this point, getting the patio going is of utmost importance to us, if only because of the many patrons we have locally that will probably lynch us if we don't get that going pretty soon. What I would like to propose is that we pull out seats, the seats that are there for the special events and classes. We pull those out so those are not available, so we are in compliance of the 16. We tell you and promise that there will be 12 seats in the patio, and we will do that until we can, take a look at more closely the needs of the business and how much staffing and seating are viable and realistic, and then come back to you at that point and say, can we assess parking and adjust the seating at that point? So I'm hoping that's...
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Perhaps you're not charging me enough for my car. You've got 26 seats, and as I understand what you're saying now is we would subtract 12 from the 26 and move them outdoors. I haven't heard anybody here opposing an outdoor seating, I might tell you that. The only question was seating. Yeah. But I don't think it's our intention to hurt your business. So it was really a question of, well, how many could you reasonably comply with in there? Mm-hmm. And as I say, 16, is it 16? The number we presently have in there is fine. And adding to that outside is probably fine.
Right.
Because they don't get in each other's way. The only time they get in each other's way is when you're not out there. If you kind of just pick them up and move them in, that's a little difficult for us as we sit here to evaluate.
I see what you're
saying. So I don't know how my fellow commissioners feel, but yes, I'd like you to get your patio seating sooner than later, i.e. right away. But I don't want to see you hurt your inside business at the same time.
Thank you. Okay.
So I don't know, and I'm going to look to my fellow commissioners or staff to come up with a suggestion how we do that. I think we might want to look at this for a little while and see what we could do. But I think I would be in favor of you getting your 12 seats outside. I'm certainly not asking you to reduce the seats inside, but I am kind of asking you to pay attention to it.
Okay.
Because we can put any number we want down, but if you ignore it, it doesn't make any difference. So I think your offer is very generous, and for me, it's too generous. So maybe, I don't know how my fellow commissioners feel, but I just thought in case you wanted to argue with me about that. So.
Commissioner Johnson.
I have a question of staff. Because whatever we do here is a recommendation to the town council, would it be within Mr. Guerra's and his partner's rights to propose a number of seats to town council rather than holding it here for planning commission recommendation? Because people often change their applications, as we know, between planning commission and town council. Would that be an option?
In this particular instance, adding additional seats to their current request would require the use of alternative use of parking. And because of that additional use, we would have to change the project description and re-notify the project at the Planning Commission level that that is part of your review before it goes to the Town Council. There's the option of hearing this subject application in the future on a Planning Commission date and re-noticing the application with that description before sending it to Town Council. But that would be in conflict with what the applicant is proposing in terms of getting the outdoor seating as soon as possible.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
If we don't want to get this thing going tonight so you can get to the council and get your approval, I think it is reasonable to say, how does it work? I also think it might be reasonable to say, add the 12, keep the 60, give us some time. I don't know what that is, 6 months or something like that. We do this all the time to revisit to see how it's working out. But it wouldn't interfere with your business right now. Plus, we would ask you to help us when it comes back up. And I'm going to come back for dinner, so I'll get to see what you're doing. And we'll see how it works. I think I can ask staff, but we can do that, can't we, without stopping his project? In other words, we'd approve with the request is what we're doing, but one of the conditions would be that we revisit and pick a number, 6 months.
Commissioner Erickson,
that's a question of staff.
It's a question of staff.
Yeah, well, just as a point of clarification, if I understand correctly, even if we were to continue this item to July 13th, the next meeting of the Planning Commission, that would not delay the time that it would go to the Town Council, because the Town Council's next meeting is on the 1st of August. I believe that's correct.
That is correct. However, we cannot advertise a matter for a Town Council agenda if it's still pending before the Planning Commission.
I didn't hear from staff on whether my suggestion would work.
So just for clarification, what we think we heard is that what Commissioner O'Donnell is asking is, could Commission approve the additional outdoor seating this evening and recommend that it comes back in 5-6 months for basically a compliance review, pass it to town, if I understood you right, approve it, refer it to town council, and with that recommendation, with bringing it back to the Planning Commission for a review in approximately 5 to 6 months, period of time. Is that what we heard?
Well, there's a wrinkle to that. The wrinkle is this. I'm comfortable with 12 out there now, and I'm comfortable with 16 in there now. What I don't know, and what we've heard no evidence on, is what if you combine the 12 and the 16 and you put it inside? We have nothing in the record on that. That's what I'm really kind of exploring. I'm not worried about his patio. I'm not worried about the people being out there. I'm not worried about the 16. But if you suddenly make it 28, there's nothing in the record to support that, and that may be fine. In fact, I would hazard a guess that it is fine, particularly if you pay attention to the limitation. So I'm saying, can we come back and find out, do we now have facts to support going forward that new limitation, which is 28 seats?
The proposal for 28 seats is actually incorporated into the existing recommended conditions of approval by allowing the maximum number of seats to be 28, inclusive of indoor and outdoor. So if you were to move the project forward today with the recommended conditions of approval, they could operate in the future without any additional review or modification by bringing in those 12 outdoor seats when the weather is not conducive to outdoor seating.
But we could, all right, we could change the motion then to approve the 12 outdoor seating, keep the 16 presently, and invite the applicant to come back when we've got facts, we've got a summer behind us, and let's talk about what happens when he moves them in. That way, we get around, I think, the problem you just raised.
As recommended currently, they could bring in the 12 seats without any additional review. So to do what you're saying by limiting them to 16 seats indoors and 12 seats outdoors at all times, you would have to modify the existing seating condition and add that 6-month review condition.
Not the existing is 16 and it's only inside. So what I'm suggesting is we have before us a fresh proposal. Leave the old one alone. So I'm not proposing to change that. I'm proposing that we approve the new request outdoors, but we do not combine them. That has got nothing to do with the existing CUP.
So if I understand this correctly, if this is approved, they will have 28 seats, whether it's indoors or outdoors. They could have 1 seat indoor and all 27 out if space permitted, or are we limiting the maximum indoor, maximum outdoor?
The former as proposed.
The former. So it is their prerogative of how they arrange the 28 seats.
Correct.
Okay.
And I'm suggesting, and maybe I'll just have to make a motion to find out, but what I'm suggesting is we don't approve that. What we approve is 12 seats outside, keep the 16 seats inside. I'm encouraging the applicant to get some experience, come back to us, and I think what he'll tell us is, gee, the 12 work great, but when it rains, I want to bring at least some, if not all, those inside, and here's how it's going to work. For example, if I knew what your head count was the 2 nights I was there,
right?
I hazard a guess that you may have had 60 people in that room. Kind of worked, but maybe not as well as you would like it or I would like it. Well, you probably like it. But this works, I think. And I'm just throwing it out in case somebody says, no, you can't do that for some reason other than they don't agree with it. Because if there is no staff objection to this in the sense of legalities, I'll go ahead and make a motion.
Staff, is there any legal reason to object to it?
There is no legal reason to object to that, but staff would just like clarification for the purpose of the recommendation because it would not change the parking requirement.
you presently do not suggest the parking requirement, you say it's adequate, I believe, if I read your report correctly.
Correct.
Okay, and I'm saying, fine, let's go with that. I'm merely saying, let's approve his outdoor eating, let's keep the indoor eating the way it is, and that's it. I'm encouraging him, one, to pay attention to what the requirements are, but two, to come back, because I think 16 is probably too low. But we don't have any facts tonight. So, am I being clear to you? Probably not.
Thank you for that clarification.
Okay. I won't, go ahead.
Okay, Commissioner Ogle.
I have a question of clarification. Doesn't the fire marshal have something to say about the occupancy of
Actually, before we move into questions of staff, are there any other questions of the applicant so that we can allow him to sit down? Okay, so thank you, Mr. Guerra.
Thank you.
And then Commissioner Ogle, her question?
The fire and building codes do provide a limitation for maximum occupancy. Maximum occupancy is different than maximum seating. For the maximum seating, we look at that and evaluate that mainly for parking considerations. The occupancy, although it is limited by the building and fire codes, it doesn't necessarily allow them to add additional seating beyond what we limit it to with the conditional use permit.
Commissioner Bourgeois.
Question for staff. Is there, if this were to come back to us 5-6 months from now when they have a better understanding of how this is working, is there a way to like have a phased seating arrangement, like when they say after some of these businesses close and parking spaces free up, can then their occupancy go up, concomitant with the available parking?
That would include the request for use of alternating use of parking, and it would require the same review as any conditional use permit modification.
Any other questions? Commissioner O'Donnell?
I will make a motion.
Go for it.
All right, I would move that we find the proposed project is categorically exempt as further described in Exhibit 2, that we make the required findings for a conditional use permit as also specified in Exhibit 2, and that we make the required findings as required by Section Roman 4, capital D, of the redevelopment plan for the Central Los Gatos redevelopment project, that it meets the use set forth in the town's general plan, which is further described in Exhibit 2, and that we make the required findings as required by the alcoholic beverage policy of the town to approve a conditional use permit to serve alcoholic beverages after 10 p.m. as more particularly described in the application, but that we modify the request of staff and the staff proposal by only approving 12 seats on the outdoor patio area and retain the existing 16 seats on the indoor area. And the conditions would be as staff has recommended and as attached. We would invite the applicant to revisit this when the applicant has more detail and should the applicant want to increase their number of seats. So that would be my motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, so are there any questions or comments to the motion? Commissioner Erickson?
I just want to be sure I understand, and some of this is probably for the staff. So while the number of seats indoors are limited to 16, if they could have 25, they could have a total of 30 people on the premises at any point in time, but they could only have 16 seats indoors. Is that correct? So hypothetically, they could have 3 staff, 16 people sitting down, let me get my math right, and 11 people standing up and be in compliance. Is that correct?
Yes, with limited number of times per year, as noted in the events condition, so that maximum number of people was specifically established for the events, which are allowed if it's more than 8 attendees to just 4 per month.
I'm a bit confused by that. You have a limitation on the total number of people, including staff, which I think is 30. You have a limitation on the total number of seats, which I think is 16. The intention of my motion, and maybe it doesn't do it, is to increase the seats outside by 12, and therefore to increase the number of people who are available, but the people sitting on the outside table should not count against the 30 people inside the premises. So I guess I didn't make that clear, but it doesn't make any sense to me to impose the 30 limitation on people that are not in the enclosed premises. So that would give him the potential of 42 people, and I assume a couple of, one or whatever it is, wait staff. But this motion does not allow him to bring those people into the premises, i.e. when it rains or whatever, or to increase the wait staff except to the extent that he reduces the patrons. The existing CUP says 30 people, and my motion says fine, leave that alone for the inside. But I'm trying to increase his capacity outside, both in seats and people.
Thank you for that clarification. To go back to the original approval, this was our first proposal that was perhaps outside of our existing definitions of bar and restaurant. And when it did come through, it did include this unique combination of retail, food and beverage service, and classes or events or trainings about wine. In that instance, and it being a unique application, the first of its kind when it came through, we did try to limit the number of seats to emphasize the retail component and how it wasn't necessarily a separate bar use. In addition to that, we also conditioned the project to allow them the opportunity to conduct those special events that made them unique, that made them more than just a wine bar. And from that, our maximum number of people for the events was limited on the available parking that space was allotted. In the condition that you are recommending, so that these special events are still limited to 30 people, and that is in addition to the 12 outdoor seats, but not in addition to the 16 seats indoors. You can certainly look at that as an option, and you can recommend that. You would just have to note that the maximum number of people on site would exceed the parking requirements as we would count them.
By how much?
Depending on whether you consider it a restaurant or bar, because we don't have a parking requirement for something in between, it would either be 3 or 4.
It exceeds by 4 or 3?
Correct.
All right. And were we to reduce the total number of seats, what would we have to reduce it by to get within the parking as presently limited?
The number of seats to meet the parking requirements would be a maximum of 28. That's not in addition to the attendees.
It's a rough night. I thought that's what we were talking about, 16 inside and 12 outside, which I think is 28.
And sorry, I apologize. The event limitation that limited the actual number of individuals also limited the number of individuals based on parking requirements. And we did it in a class equivalent combination whereby 1 parking space was required for every 3 attendees of classes. So by just limiting the number of seats to 28, 16 inside and 12 outside, but still allowing additional attendees inside, based on our previous approval, we would require additional parking for those people that are above and beyond the 16 seats inside.
At the moment, you do not limit, you do limit, but you have 16 seats plus special events, I thought.
Correct.
And the special events would be in addition to the 16 seats?
No.
Okay, well, let's keep the same condition then, but let's put 12 seats outside, 16 seats inside, and you can figure out the math, because whatever it is, it is. And I'm not trying to change that. I'm hopeful, because this sounds a little more convoluted than I would hope it has to be. When he comes back, he can make his case for why the numbers are too limiting or whatever. But to get it through tonight and to get it before the council in first meeting in August or whenever they get it, let's leave the limitation as you say we must, but otherwise say 12 seats outside, 16 seats inside. Does that work?
Yes, and just to clarify, the code does allow states the planning director, but in this case, the deciding body to make an interpretation that a different parking requirement is required. But staff would recommend that the limitation remain as is, where it's the 28-seat max.
And I will go with that this evening in my motion.
So it sounds like the maker of the motion's clear. Commissioner Ogle as the seconder?
I think so.
Okay. So commissioners, any other questions? Okay. Let's call it. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? It passes 6-0. And I hope when you return, you can clarify and simplify this as much as possible. Thank you. And this does not have appeal rights because this is a recommendation. Is that correct?
That is correct. This matter will be forwarded to Town Council, and that hearing will be renoticed.
Okay, so we are now at item number 4, which is located at 16161 Short Road, Architecture and Site Application S-11-001. Okay, and welcome, Ms. Mosley, and when you're free, we welcome your staff report.
Thank you, and I apologize. I have a tickle that won't seem to go away tonight, so I have a cough drop that I will be using most of the night tonight. The property 16161 Short Road is located 350 feet south of Old Blossom Hill Road, situated behind 16141, 16171, and 16207 Short Road. It is accessed by a driveway easement over 16171 Short Road. The applicant is requesting to demolish and rebuild a single-family residence. While the Development Review Committee has the authority to act on this type of application, due to the number of neighbor concerns received, staff believed it was prudent to forward the application to the Planning Commission for consideration. The proposed residence will be sited in primarily the same location as the existing structures. It will have a slightly larger setback to the properties on Mary Way, but will extend closer to the property at 16171 Short Road. The proposed residence would include 3,511 square feet of living area, along with a 781 square foot 3-car garage, in addition to the existing detached second unit. The proposed FAR and house size are well within the range of homes on both Mary Way and Short Road, and of the 10 properties directly contiguous to the site, 6 are 2 stories, and of similar height to the proposed residence. Throughout the process, the applicant has been aware of the neighbors' concerns regarding a 2-story design. In response to the neighbors' concerns, the applicant reduced interior ceiling heights on both floors and reduced the overall height of the proposed residence by 18 inches. In addition, the applicant reduced the size and raised the sill height to more than 5 feet above the finished floor for all the second-story windows along the east and west sides of the residence to reduce privacy concerns. The application preserves all the major trees on the site and retains the existing dense screening along most of the edges of the property. The plans were reviewed by the town's consulting architect and found to be well-designed and in compliance with the town's residential design guidelines. While a single-story design may be feasible to construct on the property, the increase in impervious surfaces and reduction in green space could impact additional neighbors and create a larger roof form. The proposed second story represents 32% of the total square footage and provides setbacks from the first floor, as directed by the residential design guidelines. In addition, the second floor is located in correlation to the immediate adjacent properties with two-story residences, also as discussed within the residential design guidelines. The applicant will provide further discussion on why a single-story residence was not a viable option for them on this property. Staff recommends the Planning Commission approve the architecture and site application, subject to the attached conditions. This completes staff's report. We're here if you have any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Mosley. Commissioners, any questions? Commissioner Bourgeois.
I have a question about 16131, the secondary unit. So my understanding, this is one legal lot, and with this development, is there an option in the future for that lot to be subdivided? And if not, I'm assuming that secondary unit has to remain and comply with our ordinances for a secondary unit. Is that correct?
Correct. There is no ability for this property to be subdivided into two properties. The secondary unit was existing when it was annexed into the town.
And just to be clear, those codes would not allow for that to become a two-story unit?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so let's call the applicant. Mr. Spalding, will you be the speaker tonight?
Yes. Arnie, we need your help.
We'll see if we can get that going, but.
Pardon me, Matt, while I...
Mr. Spalding, would it help you if we had a quick break?
It might be helpful, yeah.
Okay, so why don't we take a 5-minute break?
Secondary dwelling unit, which they want to keep, and we'll fix up in a future project. They don't have the funds to do it now. So with these site constraints, the new house really had to be located at this part of the parcel. Let's see, the next, as always, my client wanted to build an attractive house. And has a very normal requirements for a house, a 4-bedroom house with a living, dining room, kitchen, nook and family, 3-car garage. Nothing extraordinary in the design of the amount of rooms in the house or the size of the house. Now, when I first saw this site, realizing that it's like a flag lot and that all the neighboring parcels will be facing their backyards. I know from experience that we're going to have privacy issues. So designed the house to. This is the second floor plan. So first of all, we reduced the number of rooms upstairs to just the minimum 3 bedrooms, including the master. So the bulk of the square footage is on the ground level. Only 3 bedrooms upstairs. And those bedrooms look out to the front and the back and only have little windows, secondary windows that look out over the neighbors, which you see on the elevations here. So this is the front and the back. So our second-story rooms really look to the front and back, where there's not really a privacy issue. And on the sides, the windows are very high off the floor, 5.5 feet off the floor, so they're above eye level. And the windowsill's this high. And again, they're also just secondary windows, bathrooms, laundry room. Let's see. Then let's go to the shadow study. Okay, this is, here's the shadow study. So we've had lots of letters, one of which is about the shadow study and how we derive that. The data comes from the U.S. Naval Observatory for this exact latitude and longitude, and we get the data down by every 10 minutes. So the longest shadow at the winter solstice is this one here, and that's the sun is at a 16.2 degree altitude above the horizon, 131.6 degrees east of north. So this is north. The shadow, the sun is east, so the shadow is cast to the west. 131.6 degrees east. And as you can see on this property here, I set the house so that the two-story bulk here was kind of right between these two parcels, because I knew these two parcels were the most affected, which is 116 Merriway and 120 Merriway. So as you can see, I was trying to protect them from the shadows as best as possible, but also for the views. So by putting the house here, I was trying to protect a kind of a view corridor to this side of our house for 116, and a view corridor to this side of our house for 120, and tried to kind of split the difference with the shadow between the two houses. Now this is the absolute worst shadow of the year here, and it hits just the corner of 120, and it's completely off the house in 45 minutes by 9:45. The shadows is a bit worse on 116, but it is completely off of their house by, I think it's 10:20 a.m. Let me, there's some drainage issues here. This is a civil engineer. Here.
Thank you. I'm Terry Shevchuk from TS Civil Engineering. And there is an exhibit that we prepared that addresses the drainage issues. The applicant is going over and above what's required normally. This lot has traditionally been a conveyance because of the arrangement of the driveway on the low corner to the far left up top. So the natural topography just funnels water down and through the lot.
Mr. Shevchuk, actually, that is the end of your minutes, but I believe I have a commissioner here who has a question for you.
Would you explain how you've taken care of the drainage, please?
Thank you. So there's three elements to it. One is, first of all, grassy swale on either side of the house that you see parallel to the long axis of the house, above and below. That's a C3 requirement that takes the peak runoff in a 10-year storm or a large storm and treats that water by holding it there and percolating it through into the grassy swale. But over and above that, the applicant will build infiltration trenches that are parallel to the property lines, one over here with a little hook curve on it, and those trenches are 3 foot by 3 foot with gravel in them, and they're tied to dry wells, which are 3 foot diameter holes in the ground filled with drain rock that are 9 foot deep. So what will occur is the surface water will get absorbed into the trenches, then it'll get conveyed to the dry wells and disperse down 9 feet below the surface. In addition, we're proposing to put a 2 foot berm around the corner at the far left here. It's the thing that looks like a snake on there. And that will plain and simply intercept surface flow and alleviate any problem with runoff crossing into the neighbors' properties. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Johnson, it appears you have another question.
I had a question of Mr. Spalding.
Yes.
We have materials from you and your clients. But would you explain to me why you believe that a two-story house is the best solution for this lot, as opposed to going underground?
Well, first of all, we didn't have a cellar because the rooms that they wanted are not the type that we normally put in a cellar. So normally we have the primary bedrooms and the primary living areas above ground in a house, and downstairs we have bonus room, playroom, media room, services, wine cellars, and maybe a fifth bedroom or additional bedrooms. But this house is only a 4-bedroom house with a regular kitchen, living room, dining room, family room, none of which you would find underground in a normal house. And then in terms of why we had a 2-story versus a 1-story, we looked at doing a 1-story, and that puts the footprint. I have a slide. No, I have a better one. The footprint of the house gets a lot larger, and for one, so it would reduce the height a little bit, but only 6 feet. And the footprint grows considerably, which I have just a moment. Yeah, here it is right here. That's the square footage of the second story, or that the 1-story would be, with the also the additional square footage of the extra circulation the hallways needed to service all the getting to all the rooms in 1-story layout. And it really, we couldn't get a desirable layout, first of all, but secondly, it really messes up the backyard. It really messes up the drainage design. And we still have a relatively tall house, and it gets in the view of it blocks off the little view corridor we did let me it blocks off this view corridor that we did have here, and then blocks this house, their view, and also this neighbor here that's complaining about privacy also gets into their view. So it's, it might mitigate one thing, but it causes other trouble.
Any other questions? Commissioner O'Donnell?
This may
Commissioner O'Donnell, can you turn on your microphone?
Turn it off. Talking about what you're designing for the storm, for the drainage, and the only thing I've heard is a 10-year event, and I'm just wondering what storm did you design for?
The 10-year event is the storm drain design, or is the background design for large storms and for sizing of the system. So a more severe storm would result in some standing water on the property, but contained behind the berm that we had shown previously.
Well, I'm wondering, since apparently a 10-year storm would cause this piling, but you feel that your other defenses would work, at what point do they fail? What are you not designing for? For example, a 100-year event, a 50-year event?
No, yeah, correct. Not a 100-year. The 100-year would not be contained by the system. 50-year storm also would not be.
So where do we go? How low do you go?
If we look more precisely at the intensity of a, for instance, 25-year storm, I think that would be exactly where this system would break down, if you will. But it's fail-safe in that there's a bit of storage above the surface because of that berm. We can impound at maximum a foot depth of water that would sliver back up toward the house.
Let me change the subject and now talk to the turnaround for the fire truck. Could we put a picture up showing the turnaround? Thank you. So part of your problem with that turnaround, I guess, is that you have another building on the right-hand side. I understand where the building is, but I guess I'm saying you're leaving the building, which apparently does reduce the field of possible action. And I'm wondering if there were no building there, that would in any way allow you more room, one, to design the turnaround, and two, to design the house so that it would deal with some of the objections of your neighbors.
No, the fire department requires a 23-foot radius, interior radius for the turnaround. So you couldn't get around here to get a fire apparatus turnaround, and also it has to be within 150 feet of the back of the house. So if you had your fire apparatus way over here, turnaround way over here, you'd be beyond that distance.
Unless you move the house, right?
No, well, then we'd have to cut the trees.
Okay, so you can't move the house to that direction because
Can't
of
move it this way.
redwood trees.
Yeah. The only option we had with the fire apparatus turnaround would be have it go straight this way and back out that way, but then your headlights would go right into the neighbor's house, which is, people usually don't like that.
The fire truck turnaround. So when the fire trucks came down, it would bother them?
Well, no, every time the homeowner came home, the headlights would go right into their...
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Commissioner Bourgeois?
It just occurred to me, given that 150-foot requirement too, how would, if you went with the one-story configuration, would you be able to meet that 150 feet? Because it seemed to extend quite a ways.
Probably, but it'd be close.
Okay.
Any other questions? Commissioner O'Donnell?
I just have a question about the easement. I went out there and walked on a very hot day down that long corridor, and some of the letters allege that that lot doesn't have frontage. On the other hand, it appears that the easement obviously does have frontage. It comes right off Short Road. I have not seen the easement. The easement, I guess, is on somebody's land. Which neighbor's land is it on?
It's an easement. A normal flag lot is the flagpole is part of the parcel. And this is not a flag lot because it's an easement owned by the neighbor. And I believe it's, which neighbor actually owns it? Is it this one? Okay, yeah, so it's owned by this parcel. Other one, this parcel. Yes. Yeah.
And just, if you know, and if you don't know, maybe Mr. Chubchak knows, when that lot was created, and I understand it was created before it became part of Los Gatos, the person who created that lot granted the easement? Did they own all that property?
Don't know.
Okay,
I don't know how it was created.
Any other questions? Okay, so let's let others speak on this item, and then you'll have 3 minutes afterwards. The first speaker is Karen Mallison.
Hi, my name is Karen Mallison, and I have been a Los Gatos resident for almost 40 years. As a child, I lived at 120 Mary Way until I moved out of my house and into my own home. Thank you. I've been a Los Gatos homeowner for 22 years. While living on Mary Way, my room was on the back side of the house, which faces the beautiful hills off of Short Road and Shannon Road. I have spent years admiring the hills and watching homes get built. I visit my parents several times a week and have enjoyed their home as an adult, spending time with them inside and outside their home. I would like to continue visiting them with the privacy, seclusion, with the serenity of the view. A few months back, I was eating lunch with my mother, along with my 2 nephews and my niece at her kitchen table. I spotted a red light and turned my head to see a man's head with a camera taking pictures of us. I cannot tell you how uncomfortable that made me. It made me feel like I was being watched. If this is a 2-story house behind them, will I feel like that when visiting, always being watched? Keeping this property to a 1-story building will resolve a lot of the neighbors' concerns, along with feeling secure and comfortable as we have for almost 40 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions? Okay, thank you.
Okay.
The next speaker is Lois Mellison.
Good evening, Commission. My name is Lois Mallison, and I do live at Mary Way 120, and I have lived there for 40 years. John and L.B. Scott and Benjamin Gigliotti purchased this quarter lot in 2010, around August or September, and they talked to the one adjoining neighbor regarding the easement. Over the next few months, they and their architect designed this current 3,500 square foot house. And we heard from the neighbors after months that there was a plan in the town department for review. And not one of the owners had talked to us during this planning process. They came and it appeared down in the planning department. It was there. This house would sit directly behind our house. And this position is not appropriate or realistic. I brought 2 pictures that I can show you that I've taken. I presented these to the town earlier. They did not make it in your packet. I don't know why, but they didn't make it in. This is the first picture that we took.
Ms. Mellison, can you bring the microphone with you?
This is the first picture that we took. And this is the foothill off of Short, and this is the height. These are our Italian cypress. The Italian cypress are 14 feet tall. So it goes up like another 12 feet. Now, to be honest, this is what part of what they took off was over here. They took this off on that 18 inches. And now this is the new picture. We have the Italian cypress, and it's still up above probably 6 to 8 feet, totally blocking the foothill on the back side. Now this is kind of the north side of the picture, but there's more on the other side. In my very first letter to the planning department, I had said that a compromise of a building there should be a 1-story house because it is a quarter lot, and the land use for in the rules as far as the guidelines, the quarter lot are to be discouraged, and I couldn't find any evidence that they had that. Okay. And I did want to show you quickly because I did take a shadow map, and this is the peak of our house, which is the same height as the proposed house, 26 feet. And in getting the measurements, this goes across the street to our neighbors at 115 Mary Way. And superimposing this same shadow line on the 26 feet location above us, it's going to hit our house. It's going to shadow our house by 63% of the shadow. So the shadow maps that they have don't really agree with that, and I did tell them that all along. But this is realistic measurement. These are actual measurements that I have for the shadow map.
Okay. Ms. Mallison?
Yeah.
Thank you. Your time is up. Commissioners, any questions, Ms. Mallison? Thank you. And we have Robert Mallison.
Good evening. I'm Robert Mallison. I live at 120 Mary Way also. And I appreciate the commission listening to my concerns about this project. I have two primary concerns. One is the loss of privacy, and one is the loss of view. The structure's design shows second-story windows that will look directly into the 4 bedrooms across the second story in the back of my house. Also, it will look into the first floor, allow vision into the first floor family room, the kitchen dinette, and the dining room, which are in the back of the house on the first floor. Our property already is 5 feet below that property, and the property was dug out to put the structure in. This is over a half-room height. Even though the architect has altered the second-story windows to be 5 feet above floor level, that still allows anyone over 5 feet tall to peer into our living areas and our backyard. For 40 years, I have lived in this house and enjoyed the view of the foothill to the east. I currently have a work area in the master bedroom that faces this new structure, and perhaps 10 to 15 times a day take a break from activities and look at the east foothill. The structure as designed obstructs 85 to 90% of my view of that peaceful scene. This brings me to an additional point, which is that none of the 9 properties surrounding the corridor lot are in favor of a second story of the structure because of its obstructive nature. 7 of the 9 owners have sent letters to the planning department, and some of the people that are involved cannot be here tonight for various reasons. I would like to say also that some of the statements that the planning department sent you are not accurate. One of the statements is that Mr. and Mrs. Swenberg have no objections on their behalf. However, the Swenberg stated in their letter of April 7th that a one-story structure would be more appropriate for the site. Another statement is that some of the neighbors have been reluctant to allow the applicant or his architect to contact them. Greg Sheehan, representing Mrs. Olivia Sheehan at 160 Mary Way, he is the executor of their estate, and there's a letter on file from him. He tried to set up a meeting with Ms. Scott, but was told he did not live on the property and that he was jealous of the new building because it was to be bigger than theirs and the rest of the people are evil and jealous people. He also stated that Ms. Scott hung up on him, and that ended the phone call. This is not brought up in the planning department's summary. The planning department seems to follow those guidelines which will get the project approved, but ignores the guidelines regarding preservation of privacy and views of the neighbors. The department associated planner has not adhered to these guidelines, and no mention of this omission is highlighted.
Thank you, Commissioners. Any questions? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mallison.
Thank you.
And final speaker is Denise Danderan.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Denise Danderand. I'm a current resident at 105 Albert Court, but for 21 years I lived at 120 Mary Way. I was a graduate of Los Gatos High School in 1987, and I've been a Los Gatos homeowner for the last 9 years. I have 3 children that currently attend Van Meter School. While I was growing up in the Merriway house, I spent many hours in the backyard playing with my Barbies, playing Charlie's Angels with my sisters and neighbors, and even more hours lying out in the backyard working on my tan. One of my greatest memories in the house was watching the sun rise over the hill on Short Road with a dear family friend of ours before I left for college. My children spend a minimum of 1 day a week at my parents' house. My parents are the main reason my husband and I bought our house 9 years ago. We wanted to be close to my parents' house so that my children can enjoy time with their grandparents. When my children were little, my parents actually watched my kids while my husband and I worked. My children spent many days in the backyard playing soccer, wading in the kiddie pool, planting an annual vegetable garden, practicing baseball, playing hide-and-go-seek, and riding their bikes on the patio. Now that we're getting older and our lives are getting busier, when our siblings all get together, it's always at my parents' house. We usually are spending our time outside in the backyard, weather permitting, and my sisters and I still enjoy our sleepovers in the summer evenings. It seems to me that the town has taken the desires of one developer over the valid objections of the existing impacted homeowners. I normally support the town in building desirable homes, but this is an awkward piece of land that has significant issues. It appears as if we are trying to force the wrong piece of puzzle into the puzzle piece, or the wrong puzzle piece into the puzzle. There should be some sort of compromise that would make the adjacent existing homeowners happy as well as the developer. And I appeal to you to do that. Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you. Okay, that's the end of the speaker cards. Mr. Spalding, you'll have 3 minutes.
Let's see here. Okay, first of all, privacy. We're actually proposing that these windowsills from finished floor to finished sill be 5'6". So only, that's above the eyesight of everyone, but very, very tall. I mean, that's on me, that's right here. And this is the master bathroom, and this is the bed, the master bedroom with the bed wall, with the nightstands, with these windows over the nightstand. So it's when the furniture is in there, you can't even get to the window because there's furniture between you and the window. So I don't think they're going to have any privacy issues from these windows. And then this is. Here's our story poles, and this is their house is behind this wall of cypress. So, you know, our windows, I don't know that they'll even see our windows because these are like 14 feet tall. So maybe they'll see they'll see our eave, maybe the tops of the windows. I really don't think that's a privacy issue. Solar access. That house really doesn't get much shading from our proposal. Let me get back to that shadow study there. So this line here is the shadow that the cypress cast. This is 9 a.m. in the morning on the worst shadow of the year. It only hits this far corner of the house, and in 45 minutes it's completely off the house. By March, you know, only this corner of their yard is shaded, and that's mostly going to be shaded also by the cypress trees. So, you know, I think the biggest issue, significant issue, is the blockage of views. And you can see here, this is our two-story portion. It's about 60 feet at the closest to their residence, and you know we still have vistas to either side. So I think it's reasonable.
Commissioners, any questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Spalding. Okay, and commissioners, any questions of staff? Huh? Okay, seeing none, any comments? Huh? Commissioner O'Donnell.
It's obvious it's a very, very difficult lot. It's also obvious that the buyer understood that when they bought the lot. It doesn't appear that if you reduce it by 6 feet, you're still not going to have a problem. On the other hand, 6 feet is 6 feet. It is such a difficult lot that the normal rules of the neighborhood seems to me go out the window when you say what's the house across the street and all that kind of thing. This is a unique piece of property, and I tend to think one of the ways you mitigate the impact of this house is by building a one-story house. I think that the design, I mean, I don't blame the architect or the engineer. They have to do what they've got. But this is a really difficult lot, and it just adds salt to the wound, I think, to put 2 stories rather than 1 story. So that's just my comment.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Donnell. Would anyone else like to comment? Commissioner Jensen.
I respectfully disagree with Commissioner O'Donnell. I think that Mr. Spalding explained why a 2-story makes sense here. I think as opposed to many applicants that come in with 2-story designs in a difficult lot, they have tried to accommodate the neighbors' concerns. They have 5.5 feet small windows with not major rooms, not looking at the neighbors. I think they've tried to do everything they can to make it reasonable. I think he did explain, Mr. Spalding, why a 1-story would create other issues such as drainage issues, lot coverage issues, all things which we normally would try to avoid as a planning commission. So I think the design that's presented to us is actually quite reasonable.
Commissioners, any other comments? Commissioner Bourgeois.
I'll go. This is a reason we don't allow flag lots anymore in town. It's exceedingly difficult on everyone involved, trying to design for the site, trying to live next to a site like this. I can see both sides of the story. That being said, if you looked at this house with the criteria that we normally use in neighborhoods, the size, the thought that went into the design, it's all reasonable. If you did go to 1-story and tried to achieve the same square footage, I would agree that you're going to create all these other problems. So the question for me is this simply just too much house for this lot? And that is almost another issue different from what my 2 fellow commissioners brought up before. So that's what I'm struggling with, and I'd love to hear the thoughts of the other commissioners on that issue.
Commissioner Ogle?
Actually, Commissioner Bourgeois expressed what I was thinking as well. It just seems that I realize that the square footage is well within the FAR, but the amount of house just seems to just not work for this lot right now, and I'm really struggling with what's the right size here. And I really feel we're in a sort of a he said, she said situation with some of the contentions here. But I think that maybe it needs to be a slightly smaller house.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
I agree with Mr. Bourgeois' position. One of the things that we have trouble with is we all say people have a right to build on their property, and they do. But unlike many lots, this to the casual viewer is a real problem lot. And all the rules we typically apply are not designed for property like that. So when I suggest 1-story, yes, I think it should be 1-story of fewer square feet than is proposed here. There may be a right to build a house, but there's not a right to build a house of just up to what the law allows, because you got to take the site as you find it. And I really think this is such a strange lot that personally, I don't criticize the architect or the engineer for their work. They're given a lot, and they've, under that circumstance, I think, done a good job. But I don't think we have to say, therefore, you get to build a house of that size. So I agree with both commissioners on that point.
Any other comments? Okay, I'll go ahead and weigh in. In terms of the, I agree with everything that's been said. I think the one issue, if there's pros and cons of each side, and I appreciate the applicant's design in that I do feel that the windows and I feel that the decrease in height, those were all mitigated designs for the privacy issue. I am concerned about the size of the house, but if you're weighing all the things that trump one another, what I think would be the worst thing is to somehow impact the drainage issues. Having walked that site, I know I can just foresee a lot of problems if somehow we shortcut on the drainage solution that the civil engineer has recommended. And so if that means decreasing the footprint, or if it decreasing the second story, somehow it seems like if there's some way to maintain that drainage solution while somehow shrinking the house, whether it's shrinking the second story or just shrinking the size in general, I think there is still some more work that can be done. I'm confident with the privacy issue. I just think perhaps it could be a little bit smaller. And so I think that echoes what my commissioners have also said. Okay. Commissioner Erickson.
I guess I'm at this similar point as Commissioner Bourgeois led in, and while I respect the observation that the architect for the project made about one couldn't go below grade with some rooms because there would normally not be rooms that would go below grade. This is not a normal lot, so to the extent that one wanted a home on this lot with its difficulty with a certain amount of square footage, one might have to accommodate going below grade rather than up a second story with some rooms that might not normally be below grade.
Commissioner Bourgeois.
I'm going to try a motion. So I'm going to move to continue the item to a date certain, and we'll get that date from staff after I make the motion, see if it passes, for a redesign to try and reduce the visual impact of the house on the neighbors. I'm going to leave how that's done up to the applicant. They've heard suggestions about underground, one story, reducing the overall square footage. I'm not going to tell them how to do it, but I think there does need to be a little bit more accommodation from this site, and I'm going to leave my motion at that.
Do I have a second?
I'd be happy to second that.
Okay. So now that you have a second, do you want to go ahead and make the findings?
Yeah. Do I need to make findings for continuance? I don't think.
Oh,
I think
actually,
that's
you're
it.
right,
Yeah.
for continuance. Excuse me. Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Bourgeois, a second by Commissioner Erickson. Any comments or questions?
Would we want to get a date before we?
We would need to verify with the applicant, but the two dates we have, the earliest would be August 24th, and the next one would be the September 14th. So it would depend when the applicant and the civil engineer can redesign the plans, come back through the staff, through all the departments to review them, to get them here to the commission. So
24th's okay.
So the date certain for the motion will be the 24th.
Okay. So all those in favor of continuance, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, say nay.
No.
And the motion passes 5-1 with Commissioner Jensen dissenting. Okay, we are now at Agenda Item 5, which is located at 140 South Santa Cruz Avenue. It concerns conditional use permit U-10-016. And I believe, Ms. Mosley, you'll also be providing the staff report?
Yes, I will. The project site is located at 140 South Santa Cruz Avenue, on the west side of South Santa Cruz Avenue, approximately 350 feet south of Broadway. The applicant is requesting approval of a modification of their existing CUP to expand their live entertainment use to the outdoor courtyard. The events would be limited to the schedule provided by the applicant and included in both Exhibits 3 and 4 of your report. All entertainment would conclude by 10 p.m. daily. The hotel has been providing amplified events within the courtyard for several years. It came to the town's attention that it was occurring in violation of the hotel's existing CUP, which permits entertainment inside the hotel, but not within the courtyard. The applicant was informed of this and required to either comply with the existing CUP or to apply to modify their CUP to permit the events within the courtyard. As part of the pre-application process, at the direction of staff, the applicant held a neighborhood meeting in which all properties and property owners within 300 feet of the property were invited to discuss current issues and potential issues with the proposed application. Unfortunately, it came to staff's attention after notices were sent for tonight's public hearing that 4 site addresses were erroneously left off the notice list provided to the applicant. The feedback received at the neighborhood meeting was supportive, with the understanding that the hotel would be complying with the town's noise ordinance at all times. Based on the amount of verbal and written input from the neighbors concerning the application, staff has provided additional draft conditions within the staff report that have been used on previous applications that may assist in reducing or mitigating impacts on the neighbors. An additional condition or modification that the Commission could consider is permitting acoustical music and entertainment in the courtyard while leaving the restriction for no amplified music in place. Also, based on the concerns from the neighbors on Broadway and the immediately adjacent streets regarding drunk patrons and excessive noise, staff is working with the police department to provide additional patrols in the Broadway neighborhood, in addition to informing staff of all noise complaints received in regards to the Toll House and the results of the noise measurements taken. This completes staff's report. We are here if you have any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Mosley. I see Commissioner Bourgeois and then Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Ms. Mosley. I'd like to get a little clarification on the history of complaints, or originally the lack thereof. So it seems initially there was no record of complaints, but when this application, I would just like to know the sequence of how the complaints came about and what our normal process is and why we didn't have any complaints on record prior to when we did.
The only formal complaints that staff had on file in regards to the Toll House for noise was in regards to disposal of bottles in delayed hours, as well as buses idling in the parking lot or on the street. I'm not sure which one. And both those were directed to the Toll House, and they have provided mitigation measures that they've had in place since that time frame. We did not have any complaints on file prior to noticing the neighbors of this of the public hearing in regards to noise complaints regarding the events.
Ms. Bailey, do you want to supplement that?
I would like to add, though, I believe the neighbors will also be able to respond to that comment as well, is why we have not received complaints.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
I have 2 questions. Perhaps I misunderstood you. Did you say that the notice turned out to be deficient? The notice of this hearing tonight?
No, not for tonight's hearing. Staff prepared a similar notice list to the applicant a little over a year ago. 4 site addresses were left off of that address list, as we discovered when we received that information from neighbors after this, for the neighborhood meeting.
And that was prepared a year ago for what purpose?
To do a neighborhood meeting prior to application.
And that was because of existing complaints?
Partially, but also to kind of understand the context of the concerns that the neighbors had prior to proceeding with the application to determine what was appropriate.
Is our procedure that if someone is in breach of a CUP, as long as they file an application, they can continue to be in breach until there's a hearing?
Oops, that is correct.
And is there some legal basis for that? I'm asking that of the lawyer because maybe there's some statute that says you have to let people continue to violate.
That has generally been the general policy and practice of the town, absent an immediate health and safety violation.
Commissioner Johnson?
Ms. Mosley, you indicated that there were complaints regarding drunk patrons, and I'm wondering if there is a specific connection between drunk patrons and the toll house, or just drunk people in that area.
I'm not sure. The complaint came up at council on Monday. Maybe.
Wasn't president of the town
council. I'm just wondering whether or not we could relate the complaint directly to the toll house, or it was a generalized complaint.
We do not have records specifically where the results of those complaints came from.
And if any complaints are made with the police department, is there a system so that those complaints would come to planning department so that there's a correlation between a CUP violation and just noise complaints in general?
Typically, yes. And when we have an application, we do contact the police department to ensure we are aware of all the violations or complaints that have come in.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Donnell?
One other question relates to the monitoring of sound. I don't know whether it was on the desk item or whether it was in the report, but there was something about a misplacement of the monitoring device. Could you explain that?
The applicant, in anticipation of this meeting last Friday, did noise surveys of last Friday's events. The town code requires that those measurements be taken at the property line of the site. The noise measurements were taken across Broadway at, I think, approximately in front of 30 Broadway Avenue, but the applicant can speak better to that.
And that didn't start until last Friday?
That was done in anticipation of this meeting.
And when was the application for this modification of use permit filed?
Let me find out. July of last year.
Thank you.
Commissioner Johnson?
We're going to be talking about noise levels and town ordinances with respect to noise levels, and I'm wondering for Jazz on the Plaza, do you know what the noise levels are generated by Jazz on the Plaza concerts, and have you received complaints regarding those?
I am not aware of what the noise levels are, and I am also not aware of any complaints that we have received.
Any other questions? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and open the public portion of tonight's hearing. I believe the applicant will be Mr. Jim Hansen. Okay, you'll have 5 minutes to speak, and then afterwards I'll open it up to others, and then you'll have 3 minutes afterwards.
Great, thank you. I'm Jim Hansen, Executive Vice President with Larkspur Hotels and Restaurants. We're located up in Marin County at Larkspur, California. Tonight here with me also is Patricia Morial, many of you may know, as the General Manager of the Toll House, and she's been there since 2008. Also Dennis Marcus, our CEO and President, is here to show support and how interested we are in trying to get this resolved. And we also have Dave Formenti. He's with Blackhawk Technologies. He's a sound and vibration engineer specialist, and he is who we brought on last week in anticipation of this meeting, simply because when we learned of complaints for the first time, we thought, okay, let's do something about it. Let's try to provide some more information. So I'll touch on that a little bit later, but that's why Dave is here tonight. Dave has submitted a card, but and he's ready and loaded up with a presentation if we want to go that route. But we'll reserve that for questions and/or rebuttal if that seems appropriate. So we purchased, Larkspur Hotels and Restaurants purchased the Toll House in 2003. Virtually immediately thereafter, we invested little over $2 million in renovations. Many of you probably saw the transition that took place after we purchased it. And then again in 2009 and into 2010, we invested another $1.2 million in interior renovations. So we've invested in a little over $3 million, almost $3.5 million in addition to the purchase price to help try to create a new, vibrant community contributor at the Toll House and maybe bring it back to what it used to be. As a result of those investments, in part anyway, we'd like to think our management has a lot to do with that as well, but in part, the Toll House has had a significant revenue increase since we bought it in 2003, and of course that contributes to the TOT revenues as well. So we're here tonight to ask your support of the CUP modification, basically allow us to continue to do what's been going on out there for several years. We've reviewed the staff report in detail, and we accept all conditions as written. Should those be acceptable to you, they're acceptable to us. One of the hallmarks of our company in all of our locations, and we have 23 hotels in virtually 23 different cities, but we get our hotel teams involved in the community. And the Toll House, I think, has shown a lot of community support, contribution, and cooperation in many ways. And we've hosted numerous events that I'm sure you're aware of: the Jazz in the Plaza Gala, Chamber fundraising dinner, Girls on the Run, the New Millennium Foundation, Cats Night Out at Gala, Friends of the Library. And additionally, we've had public art exhibits similar to what you have here in your chambers as well, and exhibiting local artist artwork. So we feel like we've really gone out of our way to try to be part of the community and not just exist here and be a tremendous contributor. Additionally, I think we've done a good job in bringing in new social and business events. Those events obviously drive some ancillary revenues to the town and in dining and other services. So we think we've contributed in that way too that maybe wasn't happening before. But many of those events, as we're hearing tonight, do require some sort of amplified sound. And we've wanted and have used this amplified sound, whether it's a wedding reception, whether it is a combo on Friday night, we think, in a discretionary manner in what is somewhat of a very unique courtyard. And we've done that in a way that we think is prudent to the business and prudent to what we think the town residents want based upon the attendance. In May of last year, as was referenced by Ms. Mosley, we did hold a neighborhood meeting. We noticed those people on the list, and we hosted a meeting. We heard out their issues, and the bottles were one issue, the buses running was another issue, and we've since mitigated those immediately. We took action. We've also made Patricia Morial and her team readily available to whoever has a complaint or an issue or a phone call. We try to respond to those immediately. So we've taken care of all of those. In addition, tonight I've given some additional letters of support from businesses, organizations, and residents of the town for our recommendation. Lastly, we did do a vibration and sound study. We did take the noise level studies at 30 Broadway address. We do have sound recordings of those recordings, and I think they're fairly revealing if you want to hear them. So I'll leave that up to you. But we're prepared to adhere to and make sure that we follow through on any conditions that adhere to the modification.
Mr. Hanson.
So thank you.
Commissioner Jensen, do you have a question?
I do, thank you. Sir, at the May meeting, you mentioned bottles and buses idling. Did anyone complain about amplified programs or events that you'd had in the courtyard?
Not at that meeting specifically. The only discussion that might be construed as a complaint was, are you operating within the sound ordinance of the city or the town? And we are. And our expert is prepared to state tonight, even though the readings were taken at the 30 Broadway address, his calculations are that those readings would adhere to the ordinance as outlined in the staff report in terms of sound levels, had he taken them at the property line. Obviously, that's a little difficult simply because of the height of the courtyard, but certainly we'll follow through on that if that's the wish of the commission to confirm that. But one of the conditions here is that we already have one, but we'll make sure that we're using it on a regular basis. We're well trained on it, and that is to have an in-house sound meter that we continually monitor and make sure that we're where we need to be. There's also quarterly neighborhood meetings asked for. That's great. And there's also a hotline. We'll do that as well.
Any other questions? Commissioner O'Donnell and then Commissioner Bourgeois.
Before we decide, for example, whether we would like to hear from the sound expert, I want to just understand the background a little bit. I thought I heard from the staff that a one-time event or one-time evening testing was done. Was more testing done than once?
Only with our handheld meter, which I suppose wouldn't hold up in court. But so when we understood that there were numerous of our neighbors that had some issues, that's when we brought on Blackhawk Technologies. So we thought having a third party look at it, an expert in this area take a look at it, would be prudent, at least to have that much tonight. We obviously missed the requirement that it be at the property line versus the residences. It's typical we are asked to do it at the location of the complaint or the issue rather than at the property line. So we made a mistake.
Just to be clear, it has been done once and it was Friday?
It was done for over 3 hours, David? Yeah, about 4 hours. Last Friday during one of our summer series events that we started in 2007. To kind of go in hand with Jazz on the Plaza. We run them through June through September. Jazz Plaza is a little shorter than that, but the success of that kind of, wow, light went on. We should be doing something like that too, because the residents really seem to like it. So,
okay.
We jumped on it kind of late, Commissioner, and tried to do what we could when we found out Thursday of last week that we had.
Commissioner Bourgeois, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you. I want to back up even a little further. You're requesting 54 amplified events in a given year was your estimate for the CUP. How have you been operating? How many events per month, per year, and for how long have you been doing that?
The numbers were basically driven by what we've historically done. We made the best estimate we could. Obviously, every year is a little bit different, but Patricia, it's safe to say that these are kind of consistent with what we have booked for this year and did in 2010 as well.
And that goes back to when? Just to 2010?
Well, my guess is probably there were fewer events before 2010, given the 08-09 economic conditions, but I mean, this is a reasonable guess on what could be done. And
but largely based on last year.
Largely based on last year. Is that accurate, Patricia?
And if you're going to speak, please come to the podium.
It's based primarily on last year and what we have booked for this year.
Okay. And I don't know if you were here for item number 3 to hear Commissioner O'Donnell's comments about compliance with existing CUPs, but I'm just curious as to the thought process of, why is it taking this long to come in to amend your CUP?
Well, we thought we were in compliance. We kind of continued what was being done at this hotel when we bought it. It really wasn't. We did the renovations in 04. We did another set of renovations in 09 and 10, and it wasn't until 09 that really it was raised to our attention. It wasn't from residents' complaints. It was from the town coming to us and say, hey, we think you're out of compliance here, and we need to get on this.
So this came to your attention in 09, and we're just now hearing this. Okay.
We've been, I think, actively pursuing it with staff, Commissioner.
Since 09. Okay.
Commissioners, any other questions? Okay. So we'll let other people speak, and then you'll have 3 minutes afterwards.
Sure. Thank you.
The first speaker is Gail Randolph. And just a reminder, when you get to the podium, if you could state your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes.
I have a little laryngitis, too. Gail Randolph, 42 Broadway. I've lived in Los Gatos since 1971 and on Broadway since 1975. I've involved myself in civic and neighborhood issues for the entire time. When the tall house was proposed, I was there. We're talking about originally creating a hotel. We took a long and thoughtful look at the proposal. It would be a sleepy, small, upscale hotel next to a neighborhood, a nice offering to travelers and visitors who came to Los Gatos. It seemed to me and to all of us a nice companion, given our zoning and location. When the Toll House wanted to expand and add a courtyard, we again took a thoughtful look. An area for a Sunday brunch, geez, sitting outdoors seemed fine. And it would even be written into the use permit. No music, entertainment, or amplified sound shall be allowed in the courtyard. And again, I and we were supportive of the plan. Imagine my astonishment when the loud and intrusive noise began invading my peaceful home. Noise as defined in the Los Gatos General Plan is a sound that is invasive, irritating, objectionable, and or disruptive to the quality of daily life. I had taken responsibility that this would not happen. Perhaps the new owners didn't know about the CUP, and I began to call and inform them. I would call the desk, speak to the receptionist. He would notify the bar. They would turn down the music, sometimes to be turned up by increments again. Twice over the years, I talked directly to Patricia, who's been working there the last 3 years, and she told me that she wanted to work with me to set the noise level. If I called, they would turn the music down. Well, after various tries and dissatisfaction, I finally stated that I did not want to be their noise monitor. The sound engineer was there last Friday for the first time. I advised that he go over to the apartments, which are only 90 feet away, where many people reside, or come in front of my house, or come inside my house to measure the sound. The beginning of that test was done with cell phones, leveling the sound of the music with the Toll House so that he could get them to have a level that he could record for his test session. I'll just say that this social focus is not going to work for me. I don't trust working with the Toll House group. As much as I hate to say it, they seem to say things that appease but no intention of following through, operate under the principle of just go ahead and then make your apologies later. And if need be, they tell untruths. They don't work together for the good of all. They have demonstrated for 4 years that they do not abide by the current law.
Thank you, Ms. Randall. Commissioners, any questions? Commissioner Ogle does have a question for you.
Could you tell me when you started hearing this noise? Is this recent, or how many years has it been going on?
I can tell you. There's a letter in your packet from me, and I started taking rough notes on my computer in my address book when I would call the hotel, and I put down the date, and my notes, I put them exactly as I have them on, real rough, but I didn't change a thing in there, and it started in 2007. And I've called up until this year, the first night that they started up again this year.
Commissioner Jensen?
Thank you for your answer. You've indicated that you've called the hotel. Did you ever call the town, given your involvement with the planning for the Toll House that you've explained? Did you ever call the town?
No, I respond to, like, the yellow cards that come, and if there's a public meeting or, going to see things and participate that way. But I guess I'm old school, but I was brought up to know that you don't call the police unless it's a real emergency, and I evaluate that as being someone's breaking into your house or someone's hurt or at harm's way. And I guess I just stayed focused on trying to manage it myself. So, and I found out later if there had been reports to the police that might have helped us to establish some record or track record.
Any other questions? Thank you. The next speaker is Larry Lenhart.
I'm Larry Lenhart. I live at 30 Broadway in Los Gatos, California. I lived there for 12 years with my wife and my son. I think this is unacceptable for the town of Los Gatos to even consider this conditional use permit. Number one, it's directly against the Los Gatos plan of the 2020 general plan. Number two, the recommendation that has been put forth is incorrect in multiple areas. And number three, Larkspur, the hotel owner, has not been upfront at all with the community, has told multiple stories. We've heard a couple of things here today that are absolutely blatantly untrue. First of all, the proposed use of the property is essential for desirable for the public convenience or welfare. That is not true. It's noisy. We know the town council has found that unnecessary, excessive, and disturbing noise and vibration is detrimental to the health, safety, and the well-being of the constituents, and that's clearly us. Number two, the proposed uses will not impair the integrity and character of the zone. I live an 8-iron from this place. If you guys play golf, you know an 8-iron is pretty close. That's a par 3. Of 130 people outside screaming to music, loud music, that's unacceptable in my house. It's an unbelievable amount of noise that will occur and has occurred. Number three, the proposed uses would not be detrimental to public health, safety, or general welfare. Again, blatantly untrue. When they illegally played the music the last couple of years, my dog's shaking, my son can't sleep, we can't go outside. I've called the hotel on numerous occasions, at least 3 times every year. So having the instance of not having a call is again, not true. The proposed uses of the property are in harmony with the various elements of the objectives general plan. Again, the general plan says we're trying to decrease the noise, not hold it steady or increase it. So again, against the general plan. The town alcohol policy, late night service will not adversely affect the adjacent residential neighborhoods. Again, blatantly untrue. I've been out there in the front of my yard when these guys are playing loud music, and I've had people trying to get into their car with the keys, and they can't even get in their car. And I know they came from the toll house. No additional traffic is associated with the proposed application. Think about it. There's 130 seats of additional seats going in. There's 160 parking spots. There's 115 rooms plus a restaurant. You do the quick math, assuming a 70% capacity. That's over 200 spots of people just coming for this event that will live in the hotel. They don't have parking for it. They're going to be parking on our street, up and down the street, making all kinds of racket and noise. Again, some of the facts that aren't correct. Larkspur, again, the hotel, they have not been up front. We were not contacted until 6 days ago. The community event, we weren't involved. We live an 8-iron away, and they didn't have the joy of calling us. They've operated without approval illegally for several years. They're a sophisticated organization. When they did the diligence to buy this hotel, they knew the exact information about this. This is a $100 million revenue business, 22 hotels, sophisticated organization. The chairman, ex-Goldman Sachs. This sounds like it's almost the investors going back against Main Street again. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Next speaker is Dixie Fisher.
I thought so. I'm not real good with that kind of spatial. So my name is Dixie Fisher, and I have lived on Broadway for 30 years. And when I moved there as a renter, I was actually a Los Gatos Times-Observer reporter, and the Planning Commission was my beat. So I spent a lot of time in these chambers, and I want to say before we start that I really appreciate the work that you do, the hard work that you do, and the hours that you put in. So as I just noted, I live 10 houses up the street, quite a ways from my neighbors. And the first time that I heard the music from the toll house, I was in my house. I went outside, going to ask some neighbor to turn down their music, and I was going to assume, as sometimes happens on the weekends, that it was a teenager parked in their car, windows open, speakers blaring. And I was astonished to find out that the source of that, you can't even really call it music, was the toll house. So no sound meter, but you don't need one to know if I wasn't even invited, if I'm within supposedly the distance that you don't hear it, for it to be reverberating at my house, there's some kind of a problem. I'm not saying it's every time, but it's not quality music, and it's some kind of a problem. Jazz in the Plaza is such an asset to our community. I love it when the music wafts up the street, but I can count for you about when I can hear it. So as I'm walking down, and I try to get there on Wednesday nights, and darn, we couldn't get there tonight, it's usually Athena's house before I can even hear the faint sounds of Jazz in the Plaza. So that's my sound meter for you all. The sound has been intolerable for me. They are out of compliance, and so please offer us some assistance in fixing this.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay. Now, I do have a card here from Geo Davis, but I also have some, are you planning on speaking? I wasn't sure. You had a letter attached to it.
I wasn't sure if it was received or not, so, yeah, I'll speak.
Okay.
My name is George Davis, and I live on Clifton, which is, it's a small street that's just off Broadway, and I've lived there since 2006. And I do hear music, mostly on Friday nights, and that's I guess that's my meter, is when I'm sitting out there after work. My work week is long. Friday night is kind of my evening out on my patio, and it's unfortunate that that's going on. All this, I really wasn't aware of this whole public thing until a neighbor actually knocked on my door on Sunday and told me about what was happening, and that I could sign this paperwork and we could actually talk about this, because I didn't know that everybody else really knew what was going on. So anyways, I think the real issue here is who's complying with the law, or whatever, the permit. And the permit says no music, entertainment, or amplified sound shall be allowed in the courtyard in the Toll House Hotel. And if they're going to ask us to do that, then I think then we could take a vote on it. But obviously they've been doing it for a long time without complying to the law or to the permit. So just in closing, I don't want to stand in the way of music. I love the music in the park. I've been a member of the Los Gatos Museum for many years. I've donated my house to the town of Los Gatos on the historic home tour. I'm very happy to be a resident here, and I love living in this town. And I think one of the beautiful things about our area is that it maintains the quaintness and it maintains the quiet neighborhood attitude that I think all the neighbors that are here tonight, and even those that couldn't come tonight. My partner is away on a business trip, so these are busy people. Hopefully, we probably all have 3 or 4 other people that we're speaking for tonight. So I just wanted to lend my support to not have this noise be part of our future, because it's not compliant with the permit. Thanks.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay. The next speaker is Kim Karloff.
Good evening. My name is Kim Karloff. My husband, Larry Lenhart, son Luke, and I live at 30 Broadway in downtown Los Gatos. And before I start my written comments, I'd just like to say that the first time I've ever heard or seen anyone be concerned at all with the complaints that I have called about and my husband has called about was last Friday night as they were setting up the sound meter. I had the pleasure of meeting Patricia Mariel, who seems quite nice. I'd never met her before and had never been asked or responded to with our calls to the hotel. I ask you this evening to please listen to our friends and neighbors who are at their wits' end due to the sound terrorism, the drunken persons, and the litterers we've been subjected to on Friday nights the past several years due to exceedingly loud concerts and parties at the Toll House Hotel. It's located less than a block away and abuts our normally quiet and residential Broadway neighborhood. If I may, I can show you exactly where we live. In the yellow is 30 Broadway, and the arrow coming from the Toll House is well under 300 feet. That is also inaccurate information. The conditional use permit was created on February 22nd, 1995, and it states that no music, entertainment, or amplified sound shall be allowed in the courtyard of the Toll House Hotel. Let me repeat, the current use permit says no music, no entertainment, no amplified sound shall be allowed at the Toll House. The Toll House is requesting that almost 100 more people be allowed to join in their currently code-violating Friday nights. They're requesting amplified sound increases to 10 p.m. 10 p.m. The children on our street are already complaining about the horrible noise. Let me just say that the noise that might be coming from behind a truck, sitting on a microphone in front of our home, away from the toll house, does not sound like the boom, boom, boom that is probably against the Geneva Convention, that sounds like in our house and in our neighbors' homes. It is exceedingly noxious. It's been troublesome, and we've called the toll house with no follow-up except for last Friday night, just a few days ago. I request that you direct the town council, the town mayor, town manager, and police department to immediately enforce this egregious code violation. The code is on the books. The conditional use permit was agreed upon by the town council and the citizens. The timing of the onset of Toll House's concern is exceedingly troubling to me, as it does not bode well for future compliance of any conditional use permit changes. Please do the right thing, follow the general plan, enforce the current CUP, and deny the applicant any further CUP changes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Bourgeois has a question for you.
Yes.
Thank you. I just, following up on a question that was posed to Ms. Randolph, in all the times that you've issued complaints, were there ever any complaints submitted to the police department or the town?
We've called the police department when someone was trying to break into our home. It was a Friday night. I cannot prove in any way that they were at the toll house. I can prove that they were under the influence of narcotics and alcohol. We called the police then. I'm very much like our neighbor Gail. I was raised and grew up on a cattle ranch, so if we didn't call people in to help us unless it was a dire emergency. When we recently found out, and we were not on the list of distributions, so we could not go to a neighborhood meeting that we did not know about. We were not informed. Our address was one of the 14 not included, or whatever number it might be. So no, I tend to call the noise police when it's horribly egregious, boom, boom, boom. This is every Friday night, and when I've called the toll house on more than 3 occasions, I've been told that they had a permit. I mistakenly thought that was the truth for way too long.
Any other questions? Okay, next speaker. Thank you. Is Maria Risto.
Hi, I'm Maria Risto, and I reside at 85 Broadway. My husband and I purchased the home in 1992, and my neighbors have already addressed a lot of these issues. But just for your edification, 85 Broadway is much of the way up the street. From our yard, I'm on the same side of the street as the toll house. From our yard, we can hear the music on Friday nights. It was really excessive last summer. I mistakenly assumed that they had a permit to do this. I walk every day. As I walked down the street and got down toward my neighbors, I could not believe how loud it was. Now, I think decibel studies, things like that, are not going to tell you about directionality. When it's coming sideways out of the courtyard and bang against the houses down there, it is so much louder than Jazz in the Plazas at all on our street. Now, part of living in downtown is knowing that we've got the buses going up and down our street all morning on Sundays for the farmers market. We've got music and sound from the farmers market. We've got Jazz in the Plaza. That's part of what we accept as living downtown. But when we bought our house, the toll house did not have entertainment like this. And I understood that they wouldn't. And so this is not acceptable to me to have this going on against the permit, and it's not going to be acceptable to me to have this permit changed. I think they can still have their events indoors, they can still have their brunch outside, they can still support the community without requiring amplified music. Thank you.
Any questions? Okay, thank you. And the last speaker is Lee Quintana.
Lee Quintana, 5 Palm Avenue. I am not a resident near the toll house. However, in reading the staff report tonight, I was troubled by several things. First of all was the conclusion that this application was exempt from SEQA, considering that there have been all these noise complaints. I think the issues here are noise, which is a CEQA issue, conformance with the general plan, and whether it meets the findings for the CUP. The staff report addresses conformance with the general plan, but it only points out those policies which support the application, not those which would be in conflict with the application. And I think there are probably more of those in the general plan than there are to support it. Also, I think the presentation of the number of nights with noise is a little bit deceiving. Of the 54 events, 38 happen over a 4-month period in the summer when people tend to have their windows open and tend to want to enjoy the outside. That's more than 2 a week. As far as the noise studies that were done, I don't think they're accurate. As I've said before, I worked for 15 years as an environmental reviewer for the city of San Jose. I'm not a noise expert, but I have reviewed hundreds of noise reports, and normally there are 2 things that you look at. You look at the existing noise without the use proposed, and then the noise level of the proposed use combined with all the other ambient noise. And there are 2 levels of significance. One is the town ordinance on noise, which in this case looks like it's 56. The other is the difference between the existing noise and the proposed noise. And if that is above a certain amount, even if it's below 56, it would be considered a significant noise impact. I also question it may be in the ordinance, but I question the use of the time period 1 p.m. to 10 p.m. as an averaging period, because you tend to have more noise between 1 and 6 or 7, and then the noise in the evening goes down, and the noise after 10 o'clock goes down. So I think the level that that the town is looking at is really not the level that the residents feel the difference between the existing and the use with the band. It's really a matter of what CUPs are for. Is to look at the conflicts between land uses. And the land use may be consistent with the commercial, but it's not consistent with the adjacent residential. And I ask you to either continue it or deny it and do more studies.
Any questions? Okay, and our last speaker is Peter Carter.
Several of us turned cards in and apparently you don't have them.
Could you give me your name? Mr. Carter, if you can come up and I will search through this again.
I hadn't planned on speaking, but based on some of the things it said, I think some clarification is called for. We were very much involved when this process went through, that this hotel was approved, and it was a huge, huge, huge thing about the sound. And that CUP was the key reason that the Planning Commission and the Council approved the hotel. We're now some 3 or 4 or 5 owners later. Some of them have been worse than others. Some of them have been better. I think the present owners are quality oriented, but that doesn't affect the amount of noise that emanates from the hotel. There's been a lot of questions asked about enforcement. My question is it up to the residents to enforce what's in the law? Do we have to call in continually? Isn't it the town's responsibility to keep track of what's going on? Even though there have been a lot of complaints, it still, I don't feel, falls upon the neighbors to be doing this enforcement. It falls upon the town. This is not the kind of music that you experience at a Mozart wedding with a little symphonic quartet, or at Jazz on the Plaza, which is a soft music. This is rock and roll music. Amplification, if the hotel owns the equipment and they control it to a certain level, theoretically might be contained, but each brand brings in their own amplification. And I know all of you love Play That Funky Music, White Man, but you don't necessarily like it 56 times a year. Think about this 56 times, too. First of all, jazz and music are 10 times. This is 16. This is almost twice as many. If you go May, June, July, August, September, October, you've got 5 months. One event a week is 20. 2 events a week is 40. 3 events a week is 60. They're asking for almost 60 events. That means our outdoors are virtually unusable 3 days a week. That's a pretty heavy toll to pay, especially when it wasn't supposed to have been occurring to begin with. Our neighbor that went and solicited and circulated the petition that was signed by virtually everyone, 70-some people, that's a lot of people in that small area, went up to the Meadows. Everyone he passed signed until he got to the management. The management said, we won't sign. We rent some parking spaces from the toll house for $500 a month, and we don't want to jeopardize our relationship. Mike said, okay, can I talk to the residents? He said, no, you can't. I think that's going to come back and haunt them when they seek their expansion based on what they've done for their $500 worth of parking. But the fact is, we could have had every single resident of the Meadows signing.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. Any questions?
Yeah.
Any
questions?
Nope. And
If you have any questions about the history, we were right in the middle of this.
It appears there are no questions, but thank you.
Okay.
And my apologies, Ms. Carter, I do have your card.
Thank you very much. This is a difficult subject for all of us because we are very involved in the community. We like supporting Jazz in the Plaza, and Music in the Park, and the museum activities, and the Cats race, and the parade at Christmas, and the great race that comes from Saratoga, and it's all part of living downtown. And we think, we like living downtown, we like supporting it, we like the fact that there's a lot of things for families to do together, and that's part of the reason Los Gatos is so livable. We even support people shopping downtown and parking in front of our houses. We think that's actually good for the businesses, that people can park close to where the shops are, and so it is a hassle parking in front of our own houses, and a lot of times we can't find a place in front, but we think, well, that's part of living downtown, and so we put up with all of that. The noise from Friday nights, though, while it has been a little annoying because we can't entertain outside, because it is music that we can't relax and have dinner with, it is kind of, if you will, not quite highbrow wedding music, and it is play that funky music, White Boy and Brick House, and every Friday night it's the same. And we think, well, okay, maybe that's part of living close to downtown, and we figure, well, okay, 16 Fridays a year, that's a lot, but we figured, oh, well, that's part of living close to downtown. We were not notified that this request for 54 days, not events, 54 days. They could have 2 weddings a day. That might be then close to 100 events. Would pretty much destroy the quality of life for us. And what we'd like to do is go back to the original agreement. They bought the hotel with those agreements in place, and that should have been part of their business model. And our being here tonight means we respect their right to seek new sources of revenue, but it cannot be at the expense of the town that has created the value for that hotel in the first place. Charming, supported by the local residents, grateful. We can't destroy that thing of value that has been created. I would ask that you make a recommendation to enforce the permits that were originally granted, and that because of the lack of compliance up until this point, look very doubtfully upon their ability to really respond to the needs of the local people. Thank you.
Thank you. And any questions? Okay, thank you. That is the end of my cards, and so the applicant, Mr. Hanson, you have 3 minutes to respond.
Yes, thank you. Well, a lot of comments there, and certainly comments that we feel like we reached out for previously. We worked with staff on this, as was pointed out, since 2009. We noticed the people that we were told to notice. We held a neighborhood meeting. We took their input, and we tried to respond to that input. We didn't invite the people, many of the people that are here tonight, because they weren't on the list, and I suppose we should have canvassed the area and made sure the city list was right, I guess, in hindsight. I don't know that a reasonable person would have us do that, but you know, we apologize for that. It wasn't our intent. We invited everybody in the apartment building, all the residents, the management, and those addresses that we had. So, you know, I don't want it to feel like we were trying to get around or tried to shim-sham something here, because we didn't. The types of attendees that we have for the Friday music series, which seems to be the primary element of concern, is we've got pictures of a couple of events. I mean, these aren't people that are drunken, wandering down the streets, breaking into houses, and stumbling down sidewalks. So I don't quite understand that element. Calls to the hotel. I know we've gotten calls over the years, and Patricia has done her best to respond. We get calls sometimes, most recently last week, with no name, no phone number, just leave a message yelling about noise. And so we don't even know who called in many cases. But certainly the town did not get these complaints. There's no registered complaints. We're working with staff on this. Who should we be talking to? And we tried to talk to those people. We have not been operating, in our view, in violation. Again, working with staff, we weren't told to stop. I mean, we thought there were no complaints. We were doing what we thought was right, and so we kept doing it. And so I apologize for that, but we thought we were within what we could do. The sound study hasn't been formally submitted. It was a last-minute thought. The testimony about the levels of sound, the ambient sound. I mean, David can certainly speak to that if you want, but we'll certainly continue to look at that and do additional studies if that's needed as part of the conditions. And again, we accept all the conditions that have been stated. We think that they would go a long ways in trying to work with these residents and make it a better place so that we could continue to operate our business, continue to hold events and utilize the courtyard in the way I think it was intended for when it was built. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. Commissioners, do you have any question? Commissioner O'Donnell, Mr. Hanson, it appears you have some questions.
Yes, sir.
First, I would say that I know your hotel chain is good. I think you have a good operation. That having been said, however, and I think Los Gatos likes to work with people that try to do something good for the community, have a good hotel, that kind of thing. But I guess I've been sitting here listening to this whole thing, and the one thing that strikes me is you have a conditional use permit, which when you bought the property, I assume you did your due diligence, and it's clear as a bell in that it says no music, entertainment, or amplified sound shall be allowed in the courtyard. So I'm going to ask you, why should we change that? I haven't heard any reasons why we should change that. Secondly, you say maybe the complainants don't give their name, address, and things like that. What I find rather striking is people who live down the block say the noise is offensive, and your people are closer than the people down the block, and normally you would expect your people to say, gosh, that's pretty loud. So first question would be, why should we change the existing use permit? What is it that should make us say, let's go ahead and change something that was negotiated many years ago and has always been clear and apparently has been now in breach for a long time?
Well, I think the reasons for changing are fairly clear in that this is providing for a service that, based upon the usage, is something that's been desired in the city, or in the town. The most of our events that we hold, social events, are either attended by or actually hosted by Los Gatos Town residents. So we feel like we're actually providing a service in a unique, enjoyable space that people want. And it is creating an additional vibrancy to the business, it's creating additional vibrancy to the downtown, and providing a service that clearly if people didn't want it, we wouldn't do it. So attendees for the Friday night music series in the summer is very strong. Wedding events in the courtyard obviously are very desirable. And so that's, I think, why we think it's a good thing for the town as well as a good thing for our business.
Okay, that's your answer to that question. What's your answer to the second one? That you've got neighbors down the street that tell me they can't go out in their backyard and your folks don't notice the sound?
Well, I don't know really how to respond to that. I'm not there. So clearly I can't stand here and say there may not have been an event that exceeded the town sound ordinance. Patricia could call up and see if she could speak to that. I don't think we started monitoring with an actual meter until this issue came up in '09. And so trying to adhere to those sound ordinances, utilizing handheld meters with, again, we wouldn't have gone this far on this had we known there were this many, had those issues been lodged with the town earlier. We would have addressed those. We would have met with them. We would have seen what we needed to do. But certainly with the recent understanding from the residents, we brought on the expert to try to understand what we're doing and how we relate to the ordinance. So I can't speak to that relative question of is it loud or not. Does it adhere to the dB levels? I don't know. But certainly we've agreed, and I think we're a very trustworthy company. I think we really do try to do what we do and do what we say we're going to do. When we had agreed to adhering to these conditions, when it was brought to our notice in '09, we asked, do we need to stop? No, was the answer. Okay, we didn't just dream that up. So we kept operating. We thought we were operating appropriately, and we agree to continue to do so if there are new conditions put on.
Who told you no?
Staff.
Okay, thank you.
And that's what was mentioned earlier when you asked the question.
Commissioner Erickson?
This is likely a question for your general manager. Do you know of the people who attend the Friday night events, relatively what proportion of them are staying at the hotel itself, or people who are not staying at the hotel? That's part A of the question. And then have you had complaints from those people who, I assume some people stay at the hotel and don't go to the Friday night event. And so have you had complaints from the people staying at the hotel about the event itself?
Could you just state your name for the record?
Thank you. Patricia Morial, I'm the general manager at the Toll House. So the question in regards to do we have guest complaints, we don't have those kind of guest complaints. That would be something that we obviously would not want to be doing. The courtyard does house around the rooms. So, I will say that we're not trying to be a nightclub. We do have guests in the hotel. They're right there. It's like a courtyard or an atrium, I want to say, where the guest rooms surround the courtyard. So there's no way we can actually be that intrusive to those guests as well, or we would have to be providing some sort of a compensation to those, and that is not our aim as well. That's our revenue source. As far as the calls coming in, I've responded to everything that has been brought to my attention by staff, and certainly anybody that's left a name or a phone number, those have I have personally responded to. It seems like when I actually asked as I went out, when I was recently made of this development about so many people being upset about this, I did go out and knock on a few doors. It wasn't because of the noise analysis. It was because I didn't have contact names, so I didn't have any other way to reach out to these neighbors. So I did go out and knock on doors, and I know I did ask, why didn't you call us? And I was made aware that there is a police noise hotline or some number to call. So, I don't know if, we keep talking about some sort of record, but we don't have a big record of calls coming into flooding our hotel with those complaints. But again, I will say that any number, name I've ever been given, I have responded to on that. And, and I did bring pictures, and, pictures, they say that they tell a story, but we certainly want to be respectful to people. I mean, there's faces in these, and we don't want that to be the story we're telling, but we certainly want to share what type of clientele is attending this. And the other question that came up was the percentage.
Actually, Ms. Morial, he asked a specific question, and you have answered that specifically. Okay. Thank you.
Hold
but
on.
He does have another
no,
question.
She didn't answer the first question.
She didn't answer your first question.
Which was, do you have a sense of what proportion of the people who are attending the events are also staying at the hotel? The reason for asking that question, if it's 100% of the people that were staying at the hotel were at the event, it obviously wouldn't be disturbing them. If 10% of the people, I'm using extremes, 1%, let's even more extreme, we're not staying at the hotel, and you've got most of the people at the hotel who could potentially be disturbed by the event. That's the reason. I don't want you to be that precise, but do you have some sense of, are most of the people at the event staying at the hotel, or very few of the people staying at the event? Which is related to the second question I asked is, sure, you wouldn't likely not have gotten complaints from people staying at the hotel if they were all at the event.
Well, it's not 100% hotel guest. It is, actually the majority of it is local people coming in. So it's more of we get a portion of guests within the hotel, but we also have a lot of locals that come to enjoy that music as well.
So to be clear, I'm understanding what you're saying, so that most of the people at the event are not people staying at the hotel. That's your best judgment. You're the general manager. And an overwhelming majority of them, and you have not received complaints of any consequence from occupants of the hotel about the noise level of the event, who are obviously all closer than any other neighbor.
Okay. I would say that that there is it's a pretty divided split. Now, I hate to put a number to this because I have not taken analysis, but I would say 50-50. I would definitely tell you that the entire hotel does not come down, because a lot of times they've come to the area to go out and do something else. But we do get a good majority of our guests that are staying with us come down to enjoy the courtyard. So there is about a 50-50 split there. Does that answer the question?
Any other questions? Okay. Okay, thank you. And so at this time, we're going to close public testimony. And I believe, staff, you wanted to make a quick response to a couple of the issues that were raised?
One is the applicant requested that these additional letters be passed out to the commission. And second of all, in response to Mr. Carter's comment about regulating CUPs, the town cannot regulate all the CUPs that we have. When we are made aware of a complaint, we will react on it. As Ms. Mosley stated in her presentation, the town has been very much made aware of the neighborhood concerns. And in result of those concerns, we are working with the police department to beef up the enforcement in that neighborhood and to work with the police department regarding the noise issues.
Thank you, Ms. Bailey. Commissioners, any questions of staff? No? Okay. Any comments that you'd like to share? Commissioner O'Donnell.
I'm sharing this because I really would like some input from my fellow commissioners. I do think it's important that we don't make life difficult as such for good businesses in town. So that's weighing on my mind. On the other hand, when you get a conditional use permit, it is also my belief you ought to obey it. And we've had a couple of instances tonight, and unfortunately there seem to be a number of instances where people get conditional use permits and basically do whatever they can do. And I don't even say that in the sense of trying to be bad bad about it. They just, if you do it long enough, you think somehow you're entitled to it. This is rather crystal clear that they're doing something they ought not to be doing, and that they've been doing it for roughly 2 years since they've gotten notice from the town. But I also believe that when they're told, I think it is a town practice, that if you're in violation of the CUP and you file for modification, you can continue to violate until the hearing, which I find kind of bizarre. Personally, I have two choices. I can either say, no, the CUP says what it says, and that's the end of the ballgame, or I could say, you know, why don't you guys, i.e. the hotel, go back to the drawing board and come back to us at a date certain and tell us how you're going to handle this problem such that you aren't going to bother the neighbors. I'm not saying it can be done, but that's their business, not our business. The easiest thing in the world to do is just tell somebody, no. I mean, there's no reason why you should go make this noise. But maybe if they got a chance to look at it and said, you know, there are a lot of ways to do this, and here's some ways that we really don't think are going to bother people. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. So that's what I'm toying with, and I'd like some comments from my fellow commissioners.
Any other comments? Commissioner Erickson.
Well, I guess I would say before the present general manager was there, I footed the bill for two events in conjunction with my daughter's wedding that were at the Toll House, both of which were in the courtyard. So if we disturbed the neighbors, I would apologize on behalf of that, but that was in 2005. Now, neither of those events had amplified music at them, so apparently we weren't contributing to being in conflict. So, and I've been at the Toll House, and I would agree that they're a very well-run organization. I think it's unfortunate that they were either not aware or not advised to be in compliance with the conditional use permit. So I guess I would be sympathetic and supportive of Commissioner O'Donnell's suggestion that you come back with a proposal that would be supportive of your business, of what you have to do to run a business that's profitable, so that you can stay in town and continue to operate and do the positive things in the town that you do, that addresses some of the concerns which you've heard, which you received in writing and have heard very vividly tonight from the public.
Sure.
What I want to be careful of is, it appears that delay is to the advantage of the person who is in violation of a conditional use permit. I don't want what I've said to carry that forward. In other words, the easiest thing to do is to say, no, you're just not in compliance with the use permit, and that's the end of the ballgame. That's not what I want to do. If we were to say, look, let's see if we can do something better, I would only want to do that if this stuff stopped while we're trying to get to a solution, because delay should not reward somebody, particularly when the neighbors are suffering. So I wanted to throw that out, because what I said initially could forget that second point, and I'm very big on that second point. I think that it is very wrong, and I'm not blaming staff, it's the policy or whatever, and I'm sure there are staffing problems and all kinds of problems. But to allow this to go on for 2 years while we're getting our act together to figure out what we're going to do just is not my idea of how you run a railroad. So I'd like to have the railroad now get back on the tracks. So I'm suggesting something that hopefully will be encouraging to a good business in our town. But listen to our neighbors and obey what the law says. So I just throw that out.
I know, Commissioner Bourgeois, you're next. I just wanted to ask staff, that has been an issue that was raised several times by the neighbors. Can you explain the next steps, regardless of the decision that we make today?
Yes, and thank you, Mr. O'Donnell. We have also the same concern that you have, and if the Planning Commission decides to continue this matter, the applicant has been informed that they will be required to comply with their conditional use permit until the matter goes to Town Council and the decision is made there.
Okay, Commissioner Bourgeois.
Thank you, Ms. Bailey and Commissioner O'Donnell, because that was that was key to my comments I was going to make. So I'm modifying what I was going to say a little bit, but I would like to also say another thing that's concerned me is the timeline that I've pieced together from the evidence we've heard today. I've heard that I believe it was Ms. Randolph said the first time she noted it was 2007. The management was made aware of it in 2009. That's when they engaged staff. And yet we heard from 2009 to 2010, they actually increased the amount of events that they were having. So it's like they knew they were in violation, yet they escalated. And that, to me, is something that was kind of a red flag and really concerning. So I agree with the direction that Commissioner O'Donnell was going with things, and I would be supportive of that, given the condition that in the interim it would stop. And if I could just finally add, you know, I'm very hesitant to change conditional use permit that was negotiated. I know what it's like to be up here and see iteration after iteration after iteration of a conditional use permit on a big project in town come back before us, and again and again. And all those conditions, I know in this town, there was a lot of thought and reasoning put into them. So it's going to have to be, for me personally, a rock solid, you know, something the neighbors support to change a CUP of this stature and tenure on such a large project.
Any other comments? No, what I'd like to just, I don't know if the applicant was here when we were, I think it was item number 3, it was also a CUP, and they were actually in violation also. And I just want to make it clear, because it may seem that there's inconsistencies in how we're handling it, but the big difference between that CUP and this CUP is that CUP, there was no identifiable detriment to the existing neighborhood nor to the town. And in this case, it is pretty quite evident that change of the CUP, much less non-enforcement of it, would just continue to negatively impact the neighborhood. And that's something that I think all of us here would unanimously say is not acceptable. Commissioner O'Donnell.
And I'll make a motion. The motion would be we would continue this matter to a date certain with the understanding of what staff just told us, that the conditional use permit will now be enforced. The timing is not important to me, because as long as it's enforced, it's not hurting anybody. So that would be up to the applicant to tell us what kind of time they need. I would say, just off the top of my head, that I would, if I were the applicant, I'd like to have at least 90 days, because I don't know what they're going to do. I agree with Commissioner Bourgeois. I don't know any easy answers to this problem, but I don't want to foreclose the possibilities. I don't know whether you can put something over the top when you're having this kind of music, or what you can do, and maybe you can't do anything. But if that's the case, I think, fine, you're in violation of the use permit. Now, the chair, I would just call to your attention that the applicant is raising his hand. We've, I think, closed the public hearing, so if you would like to, I don't know if you want to reopen for a minute and see what he wants to say or not. But my motion was that we continue it. I'm going to suggest, and he may speak to this, I'm going to suggest at this point that the continuance be 90 days to allow the applicant to come back before us and tell us what, if anything, they can do to satisfy the reasonable request of the neighbors that the noise rules be enforced, or not. So that's the motion.
As we normally permit, when we move things to a date certain, I do open it up to allow the applicant to say what's in a reasonable time frame. So it's very specific. If you could answer, if you have some thoughts, how many days it will take.
Well, I know that's a specific question, but I did have a question of my own about clarification of what's being proposed.
Sure.
So we've been operating under what we thought was okay conditions with the town. We have, other than the Friday night events, which we'll curtail those immediately because that we can't. We have events booked for the summer months that include weddings and other events that if we called them now and said, hey, by the way, you can't come, right? So all I'm asking is that if we did agree tonight, well, we originally asked for a continuance It was suggested we not do that. We go through with the hearing because it was conditioned upon stopping. So we would curtail Friday nights. We just asked for some time to deal with the events that are currently booked that would be significant impact to those people. But
And then if you can answer the specific question of,
90 days would be fine, but we could probably do it faster.
okay. Now, staff, is 90 days, is that something that you can work within your own time frame?
Well, in terms for the continuance to hear the matter, yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, no.
but let's go back to
O'Donnell.
the issue he raised, which it seems to me is a contractual issue. Obviously, if somebody's daughter's having a reception from a wedding, he's got a problem there. But I kind of wonder, as we just heard, you've had a couple of events there where there was no amplified sound, and I assume, maybe I'm wrong, but I assume the amplified sound is the problem. Now, wait a minute, I realize, let me get this out and we'll see what we do with it. But, I mean, the hotel, for whatever reason, is between a rock and a hard place, and part of the problem is the town. The town said, as long as you've got this pending, go ahead. And I'm not trying to assess blame, but I'm saying if you have contractual obligations and somebody tells you, yeah, you can do this till something happens, and you rely on that, you can be put in a fairly difficult position. On the other hand, this is clear as a bell. It says don't do it. So I'm trying to cut the baby in half or something. I don't know what I'm trying to do. But what I'm trying to do is throw out the possibility, is it at all possible if somebody said no amplified sound, if somebody wants to have a string quartet or something in there for the 90-day period while we're trying to resolve this issue, I guess I should direct this to staff because I can't ask the audience, but
What I'd like to do is let's first deal with the CUP at hand. And enforcement, code enforcement, that's something that I'm going to ask staff to comment on because that's something that I believe there's a plan in place and that you can give us the details of what exactly is that plan. Is it amplified music or is it just following the letter of the CUP as is? But what I'd like to do is just focus on the motion. We have a motion, so let's focus on that. It was to continue to a date certain, and I need a second.
I'll second the motion.
Okay.
I would like to make it clear that one thing I would like to see when this comes back to us is a noise study that meets the town requirements for distances, and I would be interested to see the noise levels not just with the music, but without the music, so we can understand what that delta is. That would be something I would be interested in seeing. I don't want that to be a part of the motion, but I'm just putting that out there for the record.
Okay. So we have a motion by Commissioner O'Donnell and a second by Commissioner Bourgeois. Are there any questions? Commissioner Johnson?
This isn't a question, I guess, so much. I think 90 days is unreasonable. They have a lot of contracts out there for the summer, and I think reasonable people can either compromise or not compromise in far less time than that. So I would think that something along the lines of a couple of weeks or 30 days would be much more reasonable.
The soonest this could actually, well, I guess it wouldn't even go to council until Commissioner O'Donnell.
the issue, however, we're getting the cart before the horse because I was concerned about the same thing that you're concerned with, but I was told first let's go ahead and continue the matter. Then let's find out whether there's anything we can do for the applicant insofar as their contractual obligations are concerned. So if, in fact, the applicant can go ahead and have quiet events, that's one thing. If it falls off a cliff, then, yeah, I agree with you. It's got to go quickly. But I'm hoping we can resolve that, and the chair has suggested we assume for the moment that we'll deal with that.
Commissioner Johnson?
My only question and comment was that I thought 90 days was way too long, and your motion specifically included 90 days.
Well,
so if you're willing to reduce that, I'm happy to support it.
I probably am, except let me just tell you one thing. I am not optimistic at the moment that this problem is going to be solved. But I'm concerned enough that I don't want to tell somebody they can't solve the problem. I don't know how you'd solve this problem. But I don't know a lot of things, and I'd like to have them have a real opportunity to solve the problem. I mean, I'm in my head saying, well, you know, maybe you can put something over this thing while the events are going on. That may be totally impractical. But all I'm saying is it's not my job to tell them what they can't do and what they can do. And the reason I said 90 days was I think it's a real problem. And if you tell somebody, go solve this problem in 2 weeks, I don't think you can solve this problem in 2 weeks. So I would suggest to the commissioner that if you want to suggest another time, but I would ask that it be reasonable enough to allow them time to study the issue, to see if there's some solution to the issue that I don't know about right now. So it's a tough problem.
Commissioner Erickson.
The language in the present CUP says no music, entertainment, or amplified sound. I don't believe that we heard complaints about music that wasn't amplified from the public. So if we were, so hypothetically, the string quartet example that Commissioner O'Donnell used earlier is not permitted at all under the present conditional use permit. So if the intent of the town would be to strictly enforce the present CUP, then it would seem to me any event that involved either music, entertainment, which is a pretty broad term, or amplified sound could not occur in the courtyard. And so it would probably very significantly limit their ability to deliver on their present agreements with people. Hypothetically, I'm not saying that's a reason not to do it, but it's pretty broad limiting language.
Just a second. Let's hear from staff.
Let me just make a couple comments that may or may not be helpful as you work through this. What's before you is a request for additional conditions of modification of the existing CUP. What you've heard from the neighbors tonight, and we heard at council on Monday night, is that there's a great deal of concern over the next few months, certainly in the summer when the sensitivity to the noise seems to be at the highest. Chair Sayak recommended that you address the issue of the continuance, and that may be one motion. And while commission doesn't dictate how the town enforces complaints of noise or violations of CUPs, clearly the town heard you, the neighbors tonight, Monday night, when they came to council, and that matter has been referred to town staff. And while this commission doesn't direct staff on how to enforce, we certainly would welcome some suggestions tonight of things that you think might be responsive in this interim, ranging from absolute compliance with the CUP to what I think we hear is some middle ground. And some of the middle ground that you might want to discuss, and in any way that you come out, is the issue of music in the courtyard, or whether that music needs to be moved internally, whether doors and windows need to be open or closed, whether amplified music, loudspeakers, microphones should be allowed or not, hours of operation. As again, these would be recommendations. Just as if you were moving this forward to council with your recommendations, there's nothing that precludes you from taking these issues into account and making those recommendations tonight, knowing that it will be moved on to town staff as well as ultimately the council.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
I appreciate that. That's good advice. What I had been thinking was kind of that, i.e. the town, I'm not saying the staff has had a policy, the town has had this policy. Now you're saying policy's not really working here. We're going to stop doing that. We're going to enforce this right now, which is good. Certainly that's what the commission would like to see. But I do think you potentially have some leeway. If you've been doing a policy for so long, you might say, well, we want to clamp down on what the real issue here is, and the real issue is noise. And it is a staff issue. It is not my issue. My personal feeling would be I'd be surprised if the neighbors would be offended by string quartets or things like that. Maybe they would be. but I'm just doubtful from what they've said. So if the staff felt, we're going to enforce this in the spirit of it, realizing that ultimately, initially, the Planning Commission will have before it the possibility of modifying or amending paragraph 7, but that's going to be dependent upon what we hear from the applicant. So I think we're saying the same thing. We're saying if we continue it, for whatever it's worth, if this commission feels that if the applicant either gets rid of this amplified sound, then he's got a better possibility of having music or entertainment there. But that's his problem, not our problem. I have been there for events which I wouldn't call entertainment. They might be awards, people get something, very casual. And there's a guy on a mic that says, good old Harry retired or something. But we've got to explore that. And so my motion, would be the same. We'd continue it for 90 days. I would encourage the staff, because of the problems expressed, to do what they've always done, but only with regard to this quiet stuff, and enforce what I consider the spirit of the thing, which is noise.
So we have a motion. We have a second. Commissioner Bourgeois, did you have a comment on your second?
I would like to address Commissioner Jensen's concern, because I thought of that as well, but instead of locking them into 90 days, could we say or sooner if they can reach agreement sooner?
Fine with me.
I mean, would that help alleviate your concern, or?
Commissioner Jensen?
I'd just like to vote on the motion.
Okay. So all those in favor of a continuance, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed?
Well, are we continuing it for 90 days?
It is 90 days, or as Commissioner Bourgeois amended and Commissioner O'Donnell agreed, or as sooner as the applicant can come up with a bid.
Actually, what I heard was as soon as a solution can be reached. I'm very pessimistic a solution can be reached. Therefore, I think that 30 days makes sense. So I cannot support the motion that's already been voted on.
Okay. So I have, let me just make it clear. I have one nay, or?
I either need to abstain or have be clear what the motion is, because I'm not sure what the motion was. So I either need to abstain or have clarity about what the motion is.
Commissioner O'Donnell is the maker. Can you restate it?
The motion as amended by Commissioner Bourgeois, which would be my motion now, and he can tell me if
in the microphone.
It's on. If I misunderstand him, would be we would continue this for 90 days, allowing, however, the applicant to seek an earlier hearing by requesting that. Yes. That would be the motion.
That's different. The first time I heard is or if there's a solution reached sooner. If it's you can seek a hearing for whatever reason sooner, that's fine with me.
Okay, you know what? Let's clarify this. The staff has a comment, and then can we call it again? Because, okay.
I'll add my comment. If you do wish to go that way, we would still like to have a date certain for the 90 days. If the applicant wants to hear the matter sooner, it will need to be renoticed in the newspaper and public noticing, and the applicant will be responsible for paying those costs.
Can I call it again, just now that there's clarification?
You need to clarify that the maker of the motion and the second to that motion are comfortable with that clarification.
I am, and
as am I.
Okay, so are we all clear on the motion? Okay, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
No.
Okay, so it is 5-1. Okay, now, the second part of this is if we would like to make recommendations to staff on how to proceed with actual enforcement of the existing CUP in light of the contractual obligations, as well as in light of the existing environment that the neighbors have to live with over the next couple of months. Commissioner Erickson.
I would suggest to my fellow commissioners that I think the staff has gotten the message about what the sense of our concerns are, and I don't think anything would be served by reiterating those. But I would defer to other commissioners if they think we need to reiterate them.
Okay. Commissioner Jensen?
I agree.
Commissioner Ogle, I saw you raise your hand.
Yeah, I agree, but I would just like to say that this has been going on for 2 years, and if this had come up in November, we wouldn't be up against such a time crunch. And so I'm a little frustrated that it's all been squished into the time when it becomes so critical, rather than having some time to think about this when the noise would be indoors.
Absolutely. Any other comments? Okay, so staff, you heard the comments with regard to enforcement, and I believe that is all the issues that we need to address with regard to item 5. Is that correct?
We need a date certain.
Okay, a date certain.
And in 90 days, that's approximately September 14th.
Okay. Who'd like to make the motion for September 14th?
Well, we have a motion, we agreed to it.
Okay.
The date certain, which, unless there's some objection to it, I think we can.
Okay, so it's September 14th.
I'll let Ms. Bailey do her standard follow-up question or comments about next step. But again, I think based on comments we heard from both the commission and the community, is that town staff needs to hear about the progress that both the applicant is making as well as the concerns and complaints of the neighbors. Clearly, staff, if their town staff will be taking this information and has made a commitment to enforce the CUP, and that's at the discretion of the town. If there is input from the neighbors as to, it's either that range of options that we offered the Planning Commission on recommendations, again, it's within the town's discretion, but if it's in the recommendations like we offered that the commission of the range from absolutely zero tolerance and must comply to 100% with the conditions of the existing CUP, and if there's something in a continuum that you heard from the commission tonight that some of the neighbors might feel that is a reasonable alternative in a period of time, and the neighbors may not feel that way, but that should, after this hearing, certainly be addressed to staff or the management or elected officials. And staff will be available after this hearing and certainly can give you contact info for the neighbors and the applicant to continue to work on this matter.
Well, Ms. Propp actually said most of the things that I wanted to say, but we will be working with the applicant to get further directions on this. And I do commend the neighbors for attempting to work with the applicant, but as of now, if there is an issue, could you please contact the town and let us know? And also for the neighborhood, a neighborhood representative would be really good, because I could see you're working together. So if you could appoint someone and we could work directly with one person who can, or two people, that way we can get the word, you can get the word out to everyone for that.
But Ms. Bailey, I just want to make, I see some confused faces, so I want to clarify for myself. It sounds like Friday night amplified music is immediately ceasing?
That is correct.
And that, can you give a number right now, one number, so that if there are any further noise complaints over the next couple of days, what is the appropriate number so that it is now recorded and there's no loss of record of actual complaints?
Well, I can give the planning number, but there is a police number, and I unfortunately do not have that number.
But if they call the police number, that will eventually get tied back to you guys?
Oh, yes. Yeah, we are working very closely with the police department.
Okay.
Okay. Do it after.
So it sounds like we'll clarify what number it is, and staff will have that waiting for you right here after the meeting, okay? Okay, any other questions, commissioners? Okay, so that concludes item number 5. And let's see, new other business. Ms. Bailey, do we have a report from community development?
Yes, you do. Just an update, which you may have already known what happened Monday night with the Albright application. That matter was continued to August 1st. The main issues, which you had addressed during your hearing, was the use and the height. The applicant was the one that actually asked for the continuance to work more on that matter.
And Commissioners, anything under commission matters? Okay. I just would like to remind staff that I will not be present at the next meeting, July 13. Commissioner Johnson, make sure you're clear on that. Thanks. Okay, so meeting adjourned.